All right.
Yeah, sort of.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's great to see everyone. Just wanted to let you know, as was posted, this is a joint board meeting. So just to lay the groundwork a little bit, we're going to do things in a particular sequence. So first, I'm going to open the meeting for District 75. We're going to take attendance, and then we're going to ask for D75 specific public comment. Then I will open the D120 board meeting. And again, we will take attendance and then ask for any comments specific to D120. So that way the public knows which district they're asking. Right. And if your comment is common to both districts, and it's kind of your choice when you want to speak. So with that, I'd like to call to order the District 75 Board of Education meeting on Tuesday, July 13th. Secretary, please call the roll.
Pelletier,
Here.
Fingerhut, here, Gallegos,
Here.
Kitzke,
Here.
St. Clair,
Here,
Rose,
Here.
and Holly.
Holly should be virtual. Okay, we'll check that when he comes in. Thank you. At this time, we'd like to call for citizens' comments regarding D75 issues or topics. The Board of Education really welcomes citizen input. Citizens are reminded to limit their comments to 3 minutes, and also that matters regarding employees or confidential student matters should not be discussed, nor will they be entertained. And also, as a reminder for those of you who may be new to the public comment, it's a comment section. The boards generally, in most cases, do not respond. We want your input. We take your information. And just so that's clear, it's a little different than a town hall question and answer type setting. So with that, we'll open it up for both online comments and in person, should they be any. Public comments, whether they come from our online audience or for our in-person audience. Yeah. Go ahead. Yes, please state your name. Sure. Feel free to use the podium. We ask that comments in general be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll give you a heads up when you're approaching that time.
Well, it's nice to see everyone today. My name is Lindsay Shifley, and I know several faces in the room. It's really great to see everybody. And I've recently sent some emails, and so I'm going to pretty much just work off of the email because there's a lot of people who haven't sent it that I don't have all their emails for. I'm a lifelong resident of Mundelein. I'm also a proud alumni of Mundelein High School. I was very active there. And I had the distinct honor, because of my Mundelein High School education and athletic experience, to receive a full scholarship to Northwestern University. I received a speech and language degree in 1999, and though I am not currently practicing, I did have the opportunity to work at Woodlands Consolidated School District. I'm not a speech and language therapist anymore. I am a coach and a chef. Some of you may know me from my time ambassador. I brought several tastings to our school district at West Oak. And a couple of times at Mundelein High School also, I got to address the athletes. So I'm mind-body, gut health, and just all things science and nerdy things. Just to give you a little bit of background, I'm also a softball coach, and I coach many of the pitchers in this area, and I absolutely love it. I also had the opportunity to volunteer my time in our transition building for our special needs students, and it was one of the most amazing opportunities that I've ever been given to bring that. So first and foremost, I can't imagine the stress and the challenges the pandemic has brought forth into running our community schools, 75, 76, and District 120. And I'm also speaking in behalf of my husband today. We truly believe that both all districts and its leadership teams have the best interests of everyone at heart. And I'm here to specifically address policy regarding masking that is at everyone's minds right now. And I would like to start off by imploring you to strongly consider a mask option for all students and staff in the in school, West Oak School and Munderland High School, and they've handled the past year admirably. However, my oldest, who's now going to be a junior, had a very rough start. They are beyond excited. It appears in a very healthy capacity. A few days ago, the CDC released recommendations regarding masking, that they be optional for those who've taken the vaccine, those staff and students. And though it is a positive step towards normalcy, I'm concerned due to the large group of students and staff who've chosen for a variety of reasons not to be vaccinated. Many have been exposed to COVID-19, and it is now known that we have immunity, whether we get it from the vaccine or get it naturally. And I really hope that this mask optional policy can be put into place regardless of vaccination status. The data
Just to let you know
continues.
you're around 3 minutes now.
Okay,
so if you
thanks.
could-
Let's have a little bit more.
Okay.
Life is not without risk. We've been sending our kids to school through flu seasons forever. And though we will likely never achieve zero COVID, which would be an amazing thing, I am not an anti-vaxxer. My kids are fully vaccinated with all vaccines. I think that's important for you. And I think that medical choice and freedom is a slippery slope. And I worry very much about what students are going to be put through if their teachers are to identify them as vaccinated or not. That worries me a lot. And I think that that choice is a good one. And I think that's a choice that we're all living with right now. And lastly, I encourage, those who I've sent the emails to, please spread them and just share them. I've
Thank you very much.
connected a lot of great data. And thank you so much for hearing me today. And again, I stand for medical health freedom and choice. And I think the slippery slope of identifying
Thank you.
people
Thank you.
would be a
We have
huge
to let
social and
everyone else
emotional concern.
That might be
So thank
speaking
you.
have their share. Thanks. Is there anyone else? We have anybody online?
We don't have anyone.
Okay. Okay.
I will
Thank
open
you. We'll turn it over to Laura.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'd like to open Board of Education of District 120 will now come to order at 6:38. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mellon,
Here.
Ponce,
Here.
Rostrelli, here, Pecky,
Here.
Wellington here, Gaffey.
Here.
Vote.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, and is there any citizens' comments for District 120 specific? Online? No. Okay. All right. Do you need to do your reports first? Sure.
The District 75 will now hear the report of the superintendent's office.
No. Bring it on, let's go.
So today is opportunities where we get to come together. And 2 years ago, when the board decided to move to shared services, it was for this very reason, for us to be able to come together, show how we would be able to work together more, pulling our resources. And after 2 years, bringing this report to you today for what we want to be able to do as a district, I can tell you I'm very proud of the work that we've put together to give you an idea of what we're going to be working on this upcoming year. And what I'm advocating for every one of you to be able to do as board members, take these packets, please print them if you haven't, keep those with you. Every board meeting, these are the guiding principles when we're bringing information to you or recommendations. This is your role to be able to hold us accountable when, hey, when we had this meeting in July, here's what we said we were doing. How is that in line with this? So we're going to be referring back to this report come mid-year, and we're going to have an end of year summary again in 1 year from now. So with that, you're going to see that there is alignment and consistency with the programs that we are putting in place. And what you're also finding is the pooling of resources to better utilize our funds and even to be able to maybe add revenue or decrease cost are in these plans. So without further delay, Let's start off with our business office.
Good evening. I'm T. Ransack. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for District 75. As our two districts work together to develop financial goals that we could share and maintain together, we have come up with advance and expand the educational opportunities for all of our students while maintaining fiscally responsible methods and policies. So how do we do that? We do that by supporting our district-wide education initiatives, maintaining and providing sustainable staffing levels, as well as sustainable expenditure levels and increases. Finally, maintaining those balanced budgets. We can go to the next slide. As we looked at our short range goals, we put into effect three things. Challenge the traditional methods of operation and finances so as to provide resources, infrastructure, and incentives required to expand the educational opportunities of all students. The key in that section is challenging those traditional methods of thinking. So looking at our expenditures, looking at our revenues and saying, where can we find those alternative sources of revenue and those alternative maybe methods of sharing expenditures to provide reductions. Next was to promote responsible resource allocation through long-range financial planning. So what this does for us is this gives us the ability to say, this is what we're looking at coming down the line. This is what we think we're going to spend, and trying to really put out fires before they happen, basically, by looking at those, say, for example, those large groups of kids that are coming into the district that may increase our kindergarten levels, or those kindergartners that now may be entering into the high school. So those are just a couple examples of long range things that we need to be looking at and promoting those resource allocations. And then finally, to create and promote an atmosphere that's welcoming, engaging, and connects our schools, families, and communities. As the business office, and also the one that's usually responsible for fee waivers and lunch applications and a lot of connection with the community, we need to maintain those relationships and really work to foster those relationships. So that's the final short range goals that we will be implementing, both D75 and D120. So first and foremost, we have looked at what we've done as a joint shared service in terms of District 75. And when we implemented the joining of the assistant superintendent for special services, we did eliminate a position. We had an individual who resigned, and we thought we could eliminate that position. Having now come full circle, we've realized that we need to reinstate that position. But as part of reinstating that position, we do have a method and a goal that will hopefully provide a revenue source for that for both District 75 and District 120. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Andy.
I'm Andy Searle. I'm Chief School Business Official from Mundelein High School. Welcome. And we're pretty excited about this goal that we have. As T mentioned, that we're looking at ways that we can creatively get more revenue to help cover really just various expenditures that we have, especially in the special ed area, but also in that position that T just mentioned. But this first goal that we have here is to get a Medicaid specialist grant writer. And the basic goal, and I'll get into more detail here in a second, is that both districts will realize a minimum reimbursement of $2,000 per Medicaid eligible student, and also apply for and receive at least one competitive or state grant in this next fiscal year. The next slide, please. Where this idea came from, I went to a conference this spring for the Illinois Association of School Business Officials. And this whole area of Medicaid revenue has just been one that's kind of been one that I've never really looked into too much. We've always gotten a certain amount of money from it. Both districts have. District 75 has gotten a little bit more historically than Mundelein High School, but we generally were in about the $50,000 a year range. And I think you guys are maybe twice that. And when I never thought too much about where that money came from, how it was generated, it always seemed like kind of this strange source of revenue, and it wasn't very much money. Well, I went to this seminar because I was curious to think of ways, how can we get more money? How can we get more revenue for the school district? And always looking for ways to do something differently and maybe generate some more funds. And I was shocked by what the gentleman at the seminar said. He works for obviously Huntley Community School District, and all the districts here on this chart are ones that are in their region. So it'd be that whole northwest, far west, northwest suburban area. They've been able to generate $4,000 per Medicaid student, Medicaid eligible student. Now, to give you some perspective, both of our districts, 75 and 120, we'd be at the other end of this chart, not at the far end. And that's why we saw this. I saw this, and what a great opportunity where we could generate some revenue. Now, what this business manager recommended doing, and what they've done at Huntley, is they've hired a full-time person to just work on those sorts of grants, and he recommended that highly. Now, with Medicaid, the way it works, just to give you a real quick background on it, the federal government looks at school districts as being health providers in a certain sense. The typical ones you usually see are nurses. You know, you think, oh yeah, that's healthcare. Speech pathologists, that could be another one. But I guess there's a whole lot of, and again, I'm learning, this is all new to me, but you can have instructional aides, you could have social workers, you can identify all kinds of different people that can provide Medicaid eligible services. And I think that's where the opportunity will be for us to generate more revenue. Our goal, we're not going to shoot for that 4,000 right away. Hopefully that'll be something we can do somewhere down the line. We're looking more in the middle of the pack. That's a $2,000 per Medicaid eligible student. That's our goal this year. And I think that's a pretty stretch goal for us, being in the first year of a program. But if we were able to do that, Anna, could you move to the next slide real quick here? Well, I'll get to the measurables here. First of all, we'll get into the dollars here in just a second. The measurables are, obviously we'd hire a person to manage that program. They'd learn all about Medicaid reimbursement. It's quite complicated from what I understand. It is, any federal program typically is. But you have to identify teachers, staff, you have to provide quarterly information. You have to keep constantly knowing who's in, who's out, who can be reimbursed for these various positions. And that's where a lot of the work comes in, and doing those regular reports to get reimbursements. The second piece of it, there's also some special ed types of programs that they can help with as well. And those are the second bullet point there. So you have private facility reimbursement, and that's a dollar amount that you get reimbursed for when you send kids to private tuition-based programs. Orphanage, those are also very similar to that. Room and board is where you're actually sending students off totally someplace else where they're living on campus at a school. So those are different ones where they can also, I think we can generate more revenue there, and that'll be something we'll have to delve into, but that's what this person would also be responsible for helping out with. And then the last piece is that they would apply for at least one competitive federal or state grant. And there are a boatload of grants out there, but it's very difficult. Again, anything with the federal government, just think IRS and how complicated that can be. The federal government tends to have a lot of rules, regulations. This person could get up on that. There are a lot of competitive grants that can be won, a lot more on the federal level. There are also some on the state level that you can get. And that person would also have to learn that and get involved in doing that. And our goal for that person would be to get at least one of those for our districts going forward. Now we get into the fun part about money. The costs are at the top there. We have the administrative assistant, and then we also have the Medicaid specialist and grant writer. That's the cost end of it. But we think we can generate, and this I believe is conservative, is 125 to 250 per district. Now, when you think of it, Mundelein High School's only been getting around 50,000 a year traditionally, and District 120, I think, is around 125. I mean, District 75, sorry. So we can really expand that. I think that's a conservative estimate, but we didn't want to shoot for the moon too much in the first year. The projected bottom line savings, when you take all the additional costs plus what we can generate in revenue, would be 100 to 350 additional dollars in revenue, $1,000 in revenue that we can generate between the two districts. So we're pretty excited about recommending that. We're excited to see what we can do to generate more revenue this next year and make that a permanent type of revenue stream going forward. Any questions on that?
So all the additional revenue, besides the cost of the actual positions themselves, would be to improve the programs that we're offering or the services that
You
we're
can
offering.
really use it however you want to. There's no tie back to say, other than doing those quarterly reports where they say, you know, you have all these various people you're claiming, that's the fee for service part. There's administrative outreach part where people, that's again, another big paperwork nightmare where, let's say you're a speech therapist, so I'll send you a piece of paper every quarter and say, how many hours did you actually spend doing Medicaid reimbursable time? And so you have to, each one of those people, staff members has to fill that out, turn it in, and then this person would have to turn that in to get the reimbursement. So you can see just the, and I'm just giving the tip of the iceberg in terms of the amount of paperwork that's involved. But it doesn't have to be, if your question is, it doesn't have to be used for special education. It's just a revenue source that gets in there. You don't get any audit on that end. It's more the audit at the beginning to see that you are claiming the people that you can claim accurately. And then after that, you just put the money in the bank essentially and use it however you want to.
When
Is
you
that
were-
the question you had, or?
Yeah, I just wanted, like, it's great that we're gonna save money, and it's wonderful that we have additional source of revenue to implement in programs that need it.
Yes.
So that's what I was.
When you were at the seminar, did they give you a sense of the pool of people out there with the skill set that you need? I could see ideally you would want somebody who's dealt with this particular type of program, but there are also medical grant writers, all sorts of grant writers whose skill set might be transferable. So did you get a sense of how hard or difficult, easy it might be to recruit for this position?
He didn't get into that end of it. The way he described it was more like a business office person that would be more of a traditional business office, whether it would be a person that is just good with numbers, is able to reconcile accounts, but also knows about grants and how that whole process works. But there's a huge training piece of it too. And Jamie, our special ed assistant superintendent, can tell you there's also support out there that we can get for training as well. There's a lot of
So
support out there
depending
that
on
we
what
can,
you need with who. you
yes.
get.
So we wouldn't be shooting in the dark. There's a lot of people out there that can help us to train this person.
Yes, this is likely going to be a trainable position, someone who's not going to come with the skills needed. But the good news is Huntley 158, I used to work there and I worked with the person who actually does this and is getting the district ample amounts of money, obviously $4,000 per student. And she's agreed to come train our person. So we do have the ability to at least start with that first part and then work on the grant writing later.
Since this is going to be a new position for both districts and there's likely to be a learning curve, do we anticipate, and I see that you've set some lofty goals, hoping that we can meet or exceed those, but knowing that there's probably a learning curve, do we anticipate that we may want to, are we being asked to look at this maybe in one more year to see if this is, if we've met that goal, and or I would think with something like this, we may want to set a little bit more of a long-term goal so that we can meet that learning curve before we're absolutely holding them accountable to these goals.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I think, as I mentioned before, we do already have some of it in place and we are already getting reimbursement. So I think there's things that we can do even right off the bat before this person's even hired to start generating more revenue. And I've talked with Jamie about it too. We're working on that end of it to try to start maximizing those sources even now. And then once that person gets in, then they can really take off once they get trained on it.
And they can actually go back 18 months and claim any
Yes.
services that were missed.
Retroactive.
So again, that's another reason why we're trying to get this person in place, get them trained, and get them going.
So, yes, Liz.
Did you say that the fees that we would receive are tied to the services and the people, staff, not to the individual students who receive the
Oh.
services?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so if you
Okay.
think about it, we have
Right.
450 kids. in this
That are
program that are
Medicaid
Medicaid eligible. If they have just 2 services that they're being provided, now you've got 2 timesheets for every single child that relates to an actual teacher that has to sign that. And then you have an individual who's tracking all of that. So there is a lot of those kinds of
Paperwork.
things, but it is tracked by student, by staff member.
So in theory, what I said to Laura is I'm thinking, okay, you've got a student who's Medicaid eligible and that student sees speech pathologist, social worker, maybe school, I mean, there could be a lot of time sheets for that kid.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And this is why you kind of need a dedicated position to get these things. But the more this person gets involved and tracks the minutes, the more, it's basically free money because it isn't required to go back
Right.
to any program. So,
And it's services that child is getting anyways.
correct,
Yes.
exactly.
It's
Just filing the
and it's-
paperwork.
Yeah, and it's making sure
So we're sort of
we're
building Medicaid, if you will.
we're identifying every kid that can get that as Medicaid eligible, as well as the staff members who are providing those services.
So looks like it's 150 salaries, I assume, then you got benefits on top of that. So what's the all-in on those people? Plus, it just seems a little odd that the assistant's just 10,000 light of the other one. I would think there'd be a little more of a gap between the person writing the Medicaid and doing the grant writing versus an administrative assistant helping.
I prepared the financials on this, so I can answer that. So these are 2 similar, for lack of better term, similar positions, because again, we're not talking about an administrative type position. So right now, we're budgeting for this to be a lower paid position on our end, but hopefully putting in that bonus structure. So that bonus structure that says to them, okay, I'll give you a great example, the digital equity grant. This District 75 almost missed it. We almost missed it because I had no idea it existed. So this person, and this was for $125,000 that we already were spending. So that's free money that comes back to us. So this person seeking out those types of grants, seeking out corporate donations, seeking out those types of things. If we develop a bonus structure that's related to, you know, is it a one-time grant you've got in the district? Is this an ongoing grant, those types of things. So you develop the bonus structure and that's how they go above and beyond. So this is all in with IMRF, all of the health insurance, and this is the structure according to District 75 standards. So that's kind of what we've put in so far. Does that help answer?
Yeah, Mark, too, on that, on the Medicaid specialist with that bonus piece, they'll have an opportunity to make a lot more than that 80. And a lot of the federal grants, the competitive ones at least, you can build in a grant writer's piece of it's called the indirect costs. And those are sorts of things that can get built into those kind of grants that person could, that could be part of that bonus structure.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Peter.
Part of my question was answered when you answered Laura's, and that was tied more to the funds you're saying are not linked to the entity or the department from which that service was being provided. I've got 2 more parts. These are really 2 different roles though, right? Grant writer is not Medicaid specialist, but it's the same person, but they're not writing grants for Medicaid. They're writing grants for grants. And then there's a Medicaid element to this, which I'm well aware of how this works. I've done it. It's extremely tedious for the provider. You break down your day in quarter hours. It takes away from your time with students. It's a great idea. It's not as fun as anybody might imagine because there's a lot of, hopefully it's beyond paper and pencil these days. But there's also additional training for staff to really understand the intricacies of what is and what isn't. And then there are audits, right? So there is this overlooking, did I do it the right way? And your papers will get
Sent
looked
back
at
to, yeah.
possibly. And I, when we talk about, what was it, 16 months, 18 months of retroactive services too, again, it's scrutinized or has the potential to be. But that aside, these are 2 separate ways to generate revenue that are not connected.
Correct.
Okay.
But we're hoping that person will do them both.
Right.
For both districts, that's the other.
For both.
Yes, Al,
How quickly are you looking to get these people on board?
very soon.
As soon as possible. So we have both positions on the District 75 agenda tonight.
Okay. And then as far as having the person come in to help train, she's available.
I'm gonna have to talk with her and find out her schedule, and obviously I can't do that until we know when the person starts, but we will work with her. She's a great lady.
But as I mentioned too, there's already people in place, services that we use that can help us on that end as well.
Correct.
Yeah. Any other questions? We'll
See,
be,
if you
hopefully we'll be.
clarify. So are both those shared positions, or is one position specifically 75 and one of them shared?
They're both technically shared, because we do administrative assistant on up for the district office, so we're sharing everybody. So Kevin could say to Stacy that he needs her to do something for 8th grade, or say to Sarah he needs something done for 9th grade. So we're sharing all those positions at this moment. The additional cost savings comes when we actually are able to eliminate a position, so yes.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, the buildings and grounds team. Kevin Day.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Zaremba. I'm the Director of Facilities and Grounds for Mundelein 75. We are here to talk shared service goals in the maintenance side of the districts. First goal we're looking to do is hire a shared EPA certified HVA technician. A shared cost is going to be about $125,000 for the both districts. Second goal we're looking for is seal coating and striping our own parking lots. It's going to be about a $35,000 savings in between districts. And the last one is we're going to align our custodial services contracts. We'll recognize a cost of about $60,000 in both districts. Next slide, please. Here's a few pictures of some of the things we have. We're trying to show the diversity of the equipment that we have. The bottom picture and these two pictures to show that we need a certified person to be able to work on multiple different types of units. Also, we have already purchased the seal coating equipment for the parking lots, and we're going to start doing those as of next week. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Quinn. He's going to go into depth a little bit more about these. Thank you.
I am Kevin Quinn. I'm the Director of Facilities and Maintenance at District 120. Over the last year, we talked extensively about mechanical filtration, pressurization inside of our buildings, air quality. At the core of that is our mechanical infrastructure. Mundelein High School, we have 68 pieces of equipment on top of our roof. Every bit of that equipment working in concert is what delivers us appropriate air quality inside of our buildings. Those conversations didn't just start last year. That's an ongoing conversation for people from an operational perspective. Those equipment, all of the equipment requires extensive maintenance and care. There's also on this picture, the upper left-hand corner, that's our fire tube gas powered boilers inside of our lower A wing in the building. The picture next to it are 2016 modular condensing boilers inside of our the C wing, the new STEM lab. Comparable capacities, much different equipment. Direct digital controls on the equipment on the right. You don't just go up with a pipe wrench and a manometer to measure where the gas pressures are. Those are like taking your vehicle to a service station. They have to hook diagnostics equipment up to it. So it requires somebody with a skill set a little more elevated, and that's what we're going for. A lot of the equipment also requires somebody to hold a license for refrigeration. It's an EPA license. We outsource this currently. So Dave and I came up with approximately a $60,000 value between each district. So it's $120,000 total that we could bring back in-house with this position. So the savings is there. We know that the reason that we outsource, but some of it's catastrophic failure. You need a boiler goes down in the middle of winter, you have to have somebody in. A rooftop piece of equipment goes down in the middle of summer, you have to bring somebody in. If we have somebody that is working with that equipment day in, day out, we have them on call as a district's employee, we're going to be able to respond quicker, extend the life of that equipment. That person with hands-on, dedicated specifically to that task, is going to be able to project the lifespan of that equipment for us much better. So it's we see the direct benefit in that. And it's, again, it's a skill set. A lot of the equipment is that there's advancements in technology, energy conservation, and replacing equipment. So we'll be able to head of the game on that as we source that. As we look at new construction projects inside of our districts, we'll be able to bring that person into the loop with their particular expertise to help us. So we see this as a benefit. We have a substantial investment in this equipment to prolong the life for both districts, align it as we start to replace equipment, align that, standardize things, standardize control components. It's going to serve us much better. Ultimately, it'll be a much greater. There's an opportunity cost there that we can't quantify, but we know these dynamic systems are operating all of the time, 24 hours a day. And, yesterday was 105% humidity outside. We went last night 60 degrees up to 85 degrees this afternoon. So these systems, the dynamic systems are operating all the time. So we believe from an operational perspective, this makes fiscal sense and practical sense to bring that in and take advantage of the opportunity cost there. So next slide, please, Anna. So what we did is we took the measurements of success. That would be our first line on each of these. And the next one is what's our process to achieve this goal? So the first one is we're going to reduce the amount of outsource. That's at $60,000 per district. And that's an average over the course of about 2.5 years. So we're going to be able to realize those savings, not sending that outsourced to a contractor. We use a common vendor now, the best vendor we could possibly find, and we hold them accountable for what they give us. If they come to our building and we're going to pay them $1, we try to get $1 out of them. So we'll continue to have to outsource some of it, but this person will work in concert with them. We're going to extend the life of our equipment through the dedicated person doing this preventive maintenance. We do preventive maintenance. Everybody in a building does preventive maintenance, but this will be a single person dedicated to doing that. And so we're going to extend the life of our equipment. We'll also be able to budget for, plan accordingly for any equipment that's going to be outdated. New technology comes. We can budget for that going out. So we believe that that's going to come back in. Our process to achieve that, we've already reached out to CLC and we talked, do you have any candidates? Local candidates who are in your program, who are nearing completion of that program, that will be able to obtain their EPA license shortly. We've also publicized this. We've received some very good candidates back in. Dave and I have communicated with them. So we're hopeful for that. This candidate in this position is also going to require continuing education. There's advancements all the time. Refrigeration changed a short period of time ago. It's going to continue to change. There's already another refrigerant that's going to be used in the next 3 years. We'll see that come in, R35. And so that our partnership with CLC, if we don't get a candidate from them, they're open to us joining them with that continuing education that's going to be required. The second one that Dave spoke to was with our seal coating, doing that in-house. So we will do that every other year. Asphalt's a bituminous product. By its nature, it shrinks. Winters and summers, the heaving and thawing that go on through the freeze cycles, when that happens, it shrinks. You see potholes. That's a perfect example of shrinkage in asphalt. Being able to seal coat this, having the equipment and just needing to buy the bulk materials will give us a lot more freedom. It'll extend the life of that product or our lots. It'll increase the appearance of our campuses, which we're all concerned in. The overriding factor is extending the life of our pavements. And so that's that equipment, what our process is, that equipment, Dave showed you a picture of that, that's already been purchased. We need to purchase the bulk items, the material itself, and we're in the process of doing that. Dave's been sourcing that material, so that's already in progress. The reduction in the custodial services contract costs. Currently, we have managers in each district. District 75 has a vendor management. We use the same vendor. So at the end of that, at the expiration of that contract, what we would like to do is join in. We know the total square footage of all the buildings and what our requirements are. We know what our standard is for cleanliness and the functions that we support as a school, both school districts. We know what those functions are. We know what our community expects to see inside of our building. So we want to raise the standard. by controlling that with both of the districts joining, we're convinced that we'll be able to hopefully eliminate the one. Right now, we have a manager in each district and kind of a manager from that vendor overseeing. So we should be able to eliminate one of those roles. That equates to about a $60,000 to $70,000 a year savings by eliminating that role. Us being more involved directly with that contract and the hands-on manager that we'll have remaining. So we believe that's a benefit. Again, from an operational perspective, we believe this makes fiscal and practical sense. Does anybody have any questions?
I think the seal coating thing is an excellent idea. As far as if any repairs that have to be done, that would still be outsourced.
We do those. We currently do like cold patch when the asphalt plants close down. We do that. If we can group, like District 120 had a significant issue. We had some basin failures in our parking lot 2 years ago. So we had to bring a company in to do that. That was a little more significant, rollers and things like that. Equipment that financially it doesn't make sense to purchase. So we would outsource something like that. Basic maintenance of the pavement, crack filling, the seal coating, pothole repairs, we do that in-house.
2 questions. One was, did you also say striping? And then 2 was, do we have storage facility for this?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do our striping. We have the equipment.
That we
Dave and I
already
have discussed how we would do logistically, how we would do that.
That the districts have that equipment already?
Yes.
Okay.
When does the custodial contract expire?
Ours, we just signed another year, so ours will be a 1 year from now. I don't know where Kevin's is at.
And we're in the last year of ours.
I heard that because of the pandemic, that a lot of the custodial companies shut down. They couldn't stay alive because the buildings closed up, and that they're just not out there and they can't get the labor force.
We kept ours busy.
Yeah, you did.
We-
But are you gonna use the same company? So I'm just saying, maybe
That's a-
you'll have not as many to choose from, and their costs may go up.
It's a bid process, so we would have to see how many bids we get in.
One of the unique conditions about that is we had, when I had first got here, we had GCA, District 75 had GCA, underperforming, not a good company.
I remember.
But it was a company problem. The staff that was there, most of these people are community members. So they went to work for our new vendor. We would anticipate, and we encouraged our new vendor to keep those community members employed in our schools. They have students in our schools. And so we would encourage that or mandate that. So we have seen a little bit of turnover in the existing company, naturally, I suppose, but not anything out of the ordinary. The staffing's been, so far, it's been sufficient.
Beautiful.
I think it's great that this is what we talk about when we talk about shared service. Exactly it. You guys working together, having more business for someone that you get a better price when you go out to bid. So wonderful. Great to see it.
Yes. Thank you.
Next, Dan Crow, for technology.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Crow. I am the Technology Director for Districts 120 and District 75. For those of you that may not know, technology is the first department to enter into shared services between District 75 and District 120 a little over 6 years ago. So this is kind of a quick update on our goals. The Mundelein High School Technology Department now supports all technology at every District 75 school. This year, we are including 4th grade in our one-to-one. And this means that all students from the 4th grade until 12th grade will be allowed to take their devices home. Since the start of Technology Shared Services Agreement, our goals have been to combine technology services by combining things like email, phone systems, security, website, Google accounts for education. This will help make using technology easier for staff and students. It promotes uniformity between our school districts, and consortium prices is similar to buildings and grounds, helps both districts take advantage of cost savings. This past summer, we've taken a huge step towards meeting these goals by completing one of our biggest goals. This was to merge both districts into one single network, which is based out of Mundelline High School state-of-the-art data center. Centralizing the network for both districts to one location, again, it saves costs. It adds data protection, it improves management and response times, and this will allow us to go forward with completing the goals that I had mentioned earlier. That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
I have just one brief question.
Uh-huh.
Is part of merging the email and the systems, like you said, does that impact, is that only from the staff and the children's perspective, or is that also like the parent-based, like Power School and things like that? Because I think most districts use Power School, but it requires separate, but they don't quite talk to each other.
Correct. No, we will, at this time, we don't have any plans on merging Power School right now. There's really, that doesn't really get us anything to merge Power Schools.
Okay.
But what we do, what we're looking at is like combining where the server is located. Having on one server instead of two, less electricity, less cooling, you know, again, redundant backup, stuff like that.
Totally makes sense. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Up next, Shane, Human Resources update.
Good evening, everybody. So both District 120 and District 75 have relied on the talent and institutional memory of our staff to execute key administrative functions. And they've done so very well to ensure the efficiency and reliability of those services. But life happens. And a priority for the Human Resources Office for this coming year will to assist key units within both districts to build out standard operating procedures and to do cross-training so that those functions continue to run efficiently and reliably. Speaking pretty bluntly, we have very talented people, but we don't have a lot of bench strength. And so by getting units to collaborate and work well with one another, if an individual has a life event, which they have to be out for FMLA, or they're unable to complete their duties, we will already have a well-prepared process and a well-trained backup to immediately step into that. Areas of immediate concentration will be the payroll function. Some of these are very time-sensitive functions. So we won't have a lot of time to react if there is an emergency, so we're going to get ahead of it. We're also going to focus on both districts' student registration processes and District 75 transportation. The subsequent layer will be compliance reporting, FOIA requests that have to be done in 5 days, other time-sensitive functions. HR will not create those standard operating procedures, but I do have the background, and Tina and Terry do as well, to help guide those units, prepare those, and be ready in case there is a need for a transition or emergency. Additionally, we want to ensure that all new staff are prepared to hit the ground running when they're hired. There's always going to be a transition period with a new individual and a new role, but we want to ease them into that as effectively and efficiently as possible. So we are going to put a lot of concentration on creating a robust orientation program. It's interesting that there's a lot of synergy between the districts. So even an individual that may be hired at 120 and they may never set foot in a D75 building, but they may learn or be better at their position if they can learn from their peer at District 75. So we want to create those relationships and formulate a plan from the day they begin so they not only feel welcome, but they feel prepared. Additionally, we are wanting to create a District 120 confidential sick bank. That's going to be a starting point. So a sick bank would be a pool in which an individual can voluntarily donate 5 or so days to this pool. And then they would be eligible to dip into that pool if they have an emergency or a life event and need to exceed the amount of paid sick time that they have available. But others that contributed could access that as well. Currently, only District 75's certified staff have that pool. It's nothing that the district is going to mandate, but we're going to invite these other units to explore possibly doing that. And as we've seen with COVID, when you were having staff that need to be out for quarantine or for an illness, you can go through your allotted time quickly. And this creates a safety net that's available for staff. And then the last piece is that although compliance processes are necessary, it can be heavily burdensome. And so for those on the board that are in teacher capacities, I'm sure you're familiar with GCN training. And so we want to find a better way. On any given year, staff can be asked to take 27 to 36 compliance trainings. Not only can the vehicle in which those trainings are presented be lengthy and not a good use of time, the value of the education material can also be lacking. And so we are finding ways, not going through a new vendor, but we think that we can take that material and package it in a way and have it presented from different presented to different audiences by different staff with different expertise within our own districts to make sure that there's an educational benefit there rather than checking a compliance box. So that'll be another area that we're going to focus to improve. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Okay, up next, Jamie, Student Services.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Jamie DiCarlo. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services for both Districts 75 and 120. Tonight, I'm going to talk about our shared goal for both districts in the area of student services. Anna, could you go to the next one? So our goal this year is to support the emotional and mental wellness of our school community, including our students, our staff, and our families, through social emotional supports and other resources within our buildings and just within the breadth that we can extend ourselves within the community as well. Next slide. So I think it's important to acknowledge that we've been through one heck of a 15+ month period, and just acknowledge that collective trauma of the pandemic that our community felt. So it's important that we understand and we have a joint commitment to one another, to supporting one another, and our efforts to come back as strong as possible as a community of supportive and empowered stakeholders. And we learned a lot, and there were lots of rainbows throughout this process too as well. Next slide. So there's just the different areas I want to touch upon a little bit. And the best part about this is when the principals come up and talk about their goal, they're very interconnected. So the Student Services Department will be supporting the building level and vice versa. Lots of great brainstorming throughout this process together. So first, speaking about how to support our students. So professional development is continuing to be provided for our staff so that we can have safe spaces and supportive environments for our students coming back from the pandemic. And with that, a lot working through kind of that concept of reacclimating to in-person school and establishing those routines. So we're not necessarily going to get through, chapter 1 in whatever class, by the end of the second week. We really got to take extra time to develop that classroom climate, that sense of belonging. We're back to school. We're here to support you and just reintegrate into that process. Each building will be addressing wellness themes throughout the year that affirm identity, again, promote that sense of belonging, model inclusive practices, emphasize being a good neighbor and collaboration. Things that we'll be covering are things related to empathy, making healthy choices with our wellness topics, and self-care, communication, conflict resolution, and understanding our emotions. So these are the types of themes that we'll be working on with our students. Next slide. For our staff, each building will have dedicated times within their professional development calendar to learn more about the developmentally appropriate restorative practices and student supports as we return back to full in-person. So we've done some of that. We've had some consultant support, some support from our SEL and mental health teams along the way, but some concentrated efforts within that professional development calendar for the coming year. And additionally, just staff, just like all members of our community, really need that that support, those supportive outlets. And so in addition to talking through kind of self-care prioritization strategies, as we provide some professional development in-house at our staff meetings and things like that, our student services department is also working closely with Dr. Doug Bolton, who's a professional in the field of mental health, and providing professional development opportunities at both district levels. Next slide. So families, currently we have a variety. We have some variance within the two districts in terms of what type of like parent outreach, parent education opportunities we have within the two districts. So looking at opportunities to expand in some of those areas. So again, depending on the district of each of these, you can kind of flip and see where we're at with different ones and how far we are. In some areas will be new for some of the districts. So special education, parent nights and coffees, finding more opportunities for that. We've done a lot of that on Zoom and in prior years in person, but now with again, just more creative capacity. General parent nights on topics of interest. So as we've been getting the pulse through this pandemic on what what could support our families, and just in terms of that feedback that we've received thus far, some of the topics that we could do for general parent nights, and some of these we've touched on in the past, but again, to expand stress and anxiety, executive functioning for students, dealing with trauma and loss, and also creating that environment at home for personal space, for getting the homework done. Again, we touched on that a little bit last year, but offering more opportunities with that, and working with our literacy consultants in District 75, also talking about how to support that reading, the reading initiative in the household too. So those are just some of the broader general topics that we would like to see as part of our calendar for that. And then our bilingual parent advisory at both districts. We have like a beautiful collaboration between 75, 76, 120, and Hawthorne as well, where we meet monthly, our bilingual parent advisory committee. So more opportunities there, along with Universidad de Padres and those leadership pieces. And then something that will be new to 120 to 75 that we just kind of dipped our toe in right before the pandemic, with one night completed and one night scheduled, like the second week that we were closed for the pandemic, would be really a dual language parent network, and really helping both all families kind of cross-culturally understand like the multilingual elements, multicultural elements of the program. So looking to get that off the ground as well, that will be exciting. So those are just some of the ways that we anticipate helping families. Next slide, please. And so how will we know that our work is impactful? Focus groups, surveys, seeing increased participation, for example, with our students and activities and athletics, you know, how students are feeling about school. With our families, those same areas, focus groups, informal input surveys. What does our attendance look like in some of our parent evenings? Do we see increased attendance? As I mentioned, that BPAC leadership group meets monthly, so you really capitalizing on really getting deep input from the members in our community at those meetings, as well as input from other parent network groups, such as our PTO, our parent ambassadors, our SEEM Foundation, just those different entities, just more formalized input and informal input as well. So any questions for me?
Go back a couple slides to the, go forward maybe one. Let's call it that one. I think you had mentioned some of our other districts, now 75 and 120, have perhaps had access to the bilingual parent advisory. Are knowing that we have families from District 120 that are in different districts, but not 75, would they have access to some of this as well, or is this more of a specific?
That's a great question. So when we posted, when we put out our Zoom link for the 2 BPAC meetings that we had this school year with that leadership group, we extended that to the other 2 districts. So we gave that to Daisy and Art to kind of push out at their districts as well. So that was open to whomever had the link. But yeah, I would see, again, because this is an area that we can focus, and Mr. Zach is also going to support this area as well with the bilingual parent advisory. That's an area where definitely we want to continue and grow those opportunities with the other feeder districts as well.
Yeah, and I think of after last year, returning and anxiety, and yes, it can be different in different age groups, but if it's within the family's household, that family, students in one district and students in another district, would certainly be valuable for the districts.
Absolutely.
To have resources. Thanks.
Regarding students, and back on the measurements, do I recall that at some point we talked about having some mechanism by which we are reaching out, screening for mental health issues, being more proactive than we have been in the past.
Yeah, so we did do some of that this past year, and I know that Anthony's gonna talk a little bit about that when he talks about the high school, but yes, that concept continuing as well.
Okay, so that would be a part of this, is kind of what we're seeing in terms of themes or trends showing up.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, those opportunities for that feedback from students, and then we're blessed to have a broad array of staff that works within like our student services department that can then immediately respond to those concerns. Those come up from those pulse surveys.
I would like to say, this is gonna be so important because, as we all know, just a month ago, we were all wearing masks in the state. Everybody was distanced, and so I think this is gonna be a lot for kids who've gone through 15 months of being told, you gotta, keep your group small and stay distant, and now we're gonna go back, and y'all have been through the high school when the passing times go through. It's gonna be, I think, like going back to Target the first time you've been home for months, you're like, oh my God, there's people. So I think it's gonna be really important to help our students, like you said, reacclimate and deal with the trauma that they've experienced.
Absolutely. And I can tell we all shop at Target because in the past week, everyone that's offering the analogy of where they went, they all went to Target. Are there any other questions? Thank you so much.
All right, up next, teaching and learning goals. Stacy and Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Gorman. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning at D120.
I am Sarah Cacciatore. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning at D75.
And I think we need to take a moment to recognize it should not be lost on us how cool this is and the impact it's going to have on our students. I mean, our focus, we're excited to talk a little bit about how it's going to impact the learning for our students, but as you see in all the collaboration. So thank you to both boards for engaging in this journey, because I know that probably sometimes it's a little scary and a little bumpy. Okay. So Sarah and I came up with a theme. Actually, I cannot take full credit for it because this is Sarah's brainchild a little bit, but this is a great analogy of what we're going to present tonight. So we're going to talk a little bit about what our shared goal will be for D120 and D75, which will be a focus on literacy. We'll unpack that for you in just a moment. And so we're going to kind of talk about the destination. So you've heard the phrase, it's the journey, not the destination. The educational journey is very important, but we got to get kids, right, to master those literacy standards. So when they leave us after 12th grade, they're going to be, successful members of their community. And then the signposts and maps, we progress monitor, right? We're checking in and making sure that students are taking those steps to master those literacy goals and ensuring that teachers are giving that feedback along the way for areas of improvement. And then the vehicle, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get students to the mastery of that standard? And that's going to be instructional strategies. And the reason that we talked about vehicles here is because, as you know, teaching kids is not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? And so there's different instructional strategies to use with different students and their various needs. So this is our shared literacy goal. This is a bunch of Common Core stuff, right? And so basically what we're going to work on this year is helping students or having them demonstrate comprehension of fiction and nonfiction texts, drawing some inferences from those texts to make a claim, and then extracting evidence to support that claim. So that's kind of how this boils down. I think what's important, Sarah will talk a little bit about how it will progress over 12 years, but I think it's important to note that both districts have been working on this reading goal, but we really want to prioritize and focus in the upcoming years. And this is not a one-year goal, right? This is multiple years because this ultimately is the foundation for reading and writing standards in Common Core.
So what this represents is really the breakdown of that priority standard and how that looks across all 12 grades. If you were reading this left to right, the RI stands for reading informational, and then you have the grade level representation for K1, 2 as you kind of work up.
And then the last number in the combination is 1, which is it's the first anchor standard of 10 priority anchor standards for ELA. So you can see that every grade has a specific focus area that embeds those components that Stacy was just talking about as that overarching theme. And what we highlighted in bold was how you transition from one grade level to the next. So you can see the stair step of responsibility that we're placing on our students to demonstrate as they move through our educational system. When you get through 8th grade and transition to the high school, you see that 9th and 10th grade are banded together, and then 11th and 12th grade are banded together. So because of the level of rigor that is expected at those grade levels, the students have 2 years in order to achieve mastery of that component. So this is a great way for us to work with our teachers, have great conversations, and then they're able to see their grade level, the grade level prior to them, the grade level above them, and have some really nice vertical articulation conversations. So as they're working with their small groups, if they have a group that could use some enrichment, they know exactly where they're headed, or if they have a group of students who need some additional support, they know what the expectation was prior to coming to them, so they can provide that really targeted instructional strategy.
These are state standards.
These are the Illinois state standards. Yes, thank you. And then I just color coded it because it was pretty. Hannah, can you go to the next one? Thank you so much. Okay, so as Stacy mentioned, there's many vehicles, planes, trains, automobiles, bicycles. And so we really like that analogy, especially when we were talking about partnering with both districts, because developmentally, students use different vehicles. And so if you think about the training wheels of an early bike rider, we have a lot more supports in place in order to support reading in those instructional workshop models. And then as students get older and have more independence and autonomy to really drive their own instructional experiences, they get a little bit more of a linear model, but still with some choices. The reason that our elementary version doesn't have specific time set aside is because in each of our 4 buildings, their length of literacy block is different, but the proportion of time should remain the same. So you really want to focus your direct instruction or your mini lesson or your teaching point, you kind of use those terms interchangeably, as really the focus of what the intention is. And then you release the students in that larger portion of the pie where teachers are working with small groups of students, doing one-on-one conferring. The students might be in partnership pairs doing their readings. And so then you come back and you have your share out, which is the opportunity for teachers to get some feedback, those assessment points, or our maps, right? If we're keeping with the analogy, to make sure that the teacher has a sense of what the students were able to accomplish, and then how do they drive their instruction plans for the following day. In the high school, because all of their periods are the same length of time, Stacy is able to have a little bit more formalized structure in terms of how those minutes are broken down.
And it doesn't always go this way.
Well, as with any road trip, as we've experienced these last several months,
Yes.
there's often sometimes bathroom breaks or sightseeing detours, but we definitely end up at the vacation spot eventually.
I just finished a 14-hour drive from DC yesterday. There are lots of those kinds of.
Exactly. It's part of the fun
The
of a
kids
road
beating each
trip.
other up in the back of the minivan. Pull over, so.
No biggie. All right, next slide. We're at a time limit here, Anna. We gotta move this sucker
Kevin's
along.
not putting out his fingers out, they cut me off.
No, you're pretty good.
Okay,
Oh,
good.
good. Okay, great. So other vehicles, outside of ELA, we do have core classes in both the middle school and the high school. And these are some ways that we're actually teaching that common literacy standard in content areas. Again, these are some of the things that we've been working on for several years, but I'm so excited to really intensify our articulation especially between the middle school and the high school, because we can do a lot of shared instructional strategies and resources. So our focus is claim evidence reasoning, which is a part of that bigger standard. In social studies, we use something called a document-based question essay. And in science, we do a lot of inquiry-based projects. And ultimately what they're doing is students are provided with an essential question and they review documents. So in English language arts, it might be more articles and books and things like that. When you get into the more specific content areas, you're looking at maps and charts and graphs, data sets, those kinds of things. But students are doing, essentially they're doing the same thing, right? They're analyzing those texts, they're making a claim, and they're extracting the evidence for their claim and then explaining how it all connects. And so this will be really powerful for this alignment among all the core areas. They're even doing this in math. It just looks way different than what we're doing here, but it's very common across all grade levels in all core content areas.
Next, there you go. Okay, so here's how we're gonna measure it. We're gonna, sticking with our analogy, right? We're looking out the forward window. We know where we're headed. We're checking the rearview mirror to make sure we have all of our students with us as we move forward. And we wanna keep that high level of energy with a full tank of gas. So we have lots of assessments in place that we're gonna use to make sure that we're trending in the right direction and our students are making gains. The D75 group, you'll hear the presentation a little bit later from Cindy and Laura, more specifically about some of these data points. But for the essence of time, we'll kind of skim over some of these and focus really on, we know that we do have some assessments that are in both sets of districts, which is great. And we also really want to focus on those classroom visits and those grade level reflections. So looking at that previous slide with the workshop models, that pie graph, the linear chart of how we're breaking up our instructional time and having our building administrators have a common set of look fors to say, as you're going into our language classrooms, these are the components you should be seeing in that workshop block. These are kinds of conversations you can have when you're meeting with teachers. These are the kinds of questions you can ask to make sure that we're all trending the right direction. And then we can use that follow-up information to help drive the professional development for our teachers on our work days. That course grade level reflection team time is really where we'll use that K-12 vertical stair-step alignment document and talk about how are we working to make sure that we all reach that final destination.
And for the high school, there's really kind of two sets of data that we're looking at. So with STAR and SAT, that's more of your standardized data. What is really cool about these two assessments is you can break it down by standard. And so we can actually look in both the SAT and STAR how students in an entire grade level, right, are doing as they're progressing on mastery for that particular standard. And then for SATs, freshmen and sophomores take a practice SAT, the PSAT. And so we can also monitor that data as they progress from one grade level to the next. And then the second set of data that we look at is our grade level common assessments. So we have district assessments. Everyone for a particular course or grade level has to administer the assessments. And then they're able to sit down and they look at student work together to kind of identify where, you know, they're seeing student strengths and some areas of challenge. And we also, with the classroom visits, that's an important component. And we have instructional coaches who also can help with that. So they're pushing in the classrooms, they're kind of seeing how students are doing, and they're working with teachers on instructional practices that would help students move towards that shared goal.
Any questions for us? Great. Okay.
I don't know if this is the time to ask it. It kind of feels like it is. I love the vertical articulation piece, K through 12. I think that's really going to help the students. And this is probably more of a 6 through 12 question. I've noticed with the shifts from traditional grading to standards grading that one of the biggest challenges for students is they're assessed in one mechanism in a course, and then the next year they're taking the same course, but they're graded under different mechanisms. Is there any plan to kind of align those as you go? I didn't know if this was the time to ask that, but.
Thank you, Erin.
So I'm on day 13. And instead we're focusing on this standard today. But that sounds like a great thing for Stacy and I to talk about.
I mean, I have lots of thoughts. This is a priority. The grading and assessment is a huge priority at D120. So we have the policies in place, and part of them went in effect last year. More will go in effect this year. Mark and I talk about this a lot. And actually, Mark has talked with he's met with our department chairs a few times and some of our teachers to try to start aligning that, because it is the biggest issue is middle school to high school.
Right.
And then with even in the high school, you know, this as a parent, right? There's I mean, it feels like college sometimes, and kids are not, it's not developmentally appropriate to be grading on such different scales.
Mm-hmm. But I do love this topic and I'm excited to start working on it.
All right.
No, I do.
I'm sorry.
I'm kind of excited about lots of things.
I have a whole lot of
already.
exciting things to discuss. I can't wait. All right. Thank you.
Oh, great. Oh, it's good. All right.
Well, good evening. Last presentation is the principal's report. Mark Pilot's gonna start us off.
Yep, good evening. My name is Mark Pilot. I'm the principal over at Carl Sandburg Middle School. I'm here with my colleagues, Dr. Anthony Cole, Mrs. Tanya Fergus, and Mrs. Stephanie Drake, who's coming up here in just a minute. Basically, our presentation is where the rubber meets the road, right? It's just to stay with that car analogy, and hopefully with Dave's and Kevin's paving equipment, we will right. I'm aspiring, Kevin. I'm aspiring. All right. So anyway. Yeah, we're so our two goals stem from all the conversations you've already heard. We have two goals, one in the mental health area. We're going to call it a restorative start. MHS, I believe, has heard a little bit about this in June from Dr. Kroll. And our second one is engagement and learning through a focus on literacy. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kroll and let him talk about our first goal.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
All right, so I'm Anthony Kroll, principal at the high school. Nice to meet you all, to see you all again. As we've gone through the last year and a half, we do know that a lot of our students have, they've had a lot of experiences, negative experiences that they're wrestling with, they've had to deal with. It might be that they lost family members, they lost employment, family members lost employment, which means that they lost income, which impacts their rent, their mortgage, their food. More people relied on public assistance for food banks, as an example. All in all, that meant that many of our students in both districts were not in person for the last year and a half, and quite frankly, weren't involved in the fabric of the school, whether it was activities and athletics or just the school community. Next slide. So although we are excited as we come to the beginning of the new school year, and we are all very excited about starting another school year, we are cautious because we do know that as we start this new school year, there has been, as Jamie brought forth, there has been trauma, collective trauma that we need to be aware of and we need to be able to address when it surfaces. There is not going to be the same cadence that we can expect as we were probably right before we went into the pandemic. It's going to take us a little while to get that stamina back. And the emotional reactions that we have, the grief, the anxiety, the depression that we've all heard through our community contacts, through conversations with students, those are still going to have some remnants that we're going to have, and they're going to have manifestations in the classroom where we're going to have to deal with that nervousness and that anxiety. We're going to have to work with students who are withdrawn or isolated, and how that impacts or manifests itself in their behaviors in the classroom. Okay, so as we start the school year, we are again very excited. We are going in at full knowledge that there is some baggage that we're going to have to be addressing, and our main goal is to make sure that people are connected, supported, and prepared. So if we go to the next slide, the restorative restart, we are restarting after the pandemic.
but we do want to put that word in there, restorative. We want to think of it as a bit of a healing from what we've all been through. So there's 3 components to it. It includes welcoming, bringing people back into the building, connecting them to each other, to the fabric of the building, and all the things that the building offers, whether it's athletics activities and just classroom conversations. We have to reestablish some positive school behaviors. Imagine that over the time, we have lost that ability, our students have lost some of that ability possibly in the classroom of working with each other in groups, being able to integrate with each other, talk with each other, but in a organized fashion. We're gonna have to reteach them some of those skills as we start the year. And finally, we will have social emotional learning lessons throughout the school year. So as we start, next slide, please. You will see in the restorative restart activities to get kids back into the fabric of the school. You will see PD and actions done for restorative practices. Restorative practices commonly will refer to conflict resolution. We do that a lot in our dean's offices or principal's offices, working with students. But we also know that if we're going to see some manifestation of behaviors in the classroom, we have to be able to address those in the classroom. And so that's one of the areas of work that we're going to focus on this year. We're going to focus on executive function, being organized, how to do school right, and how to have those supportive school behaviors along the way. And then finally, you've heard a lot about it, and now we're going to unveil it. The social emotional learning lessons that we will have, not just in the first day, in the first week, but we will have in the first month, through the first semester, trimester, and finally through the entire school year. So we're going to explain that a little bit next, as each of us comes up and talks about the different components of that globally through each district, but also in our individual buildings.
So we're going to start with District 75 first. As you can see on the board, and this will be representative of the 120 program as well. As you can see on the projector, basically we're starting with an opportunity to aspire. All of our conversation at the building levels has stemmed from the board work that started 3 years ago, I believe, in developing the Aspire program. Right before the pandemic in February or January, a year and a half ago, or almost 2 years now, we had community feedback where we asked staff and community to come in and give us feedback on the Aspire program. So this is something you're familiar with. It's something that's gone out to our public. And we're going to really start connecting the code, the leading the pack, flying like an eagle and roaring like a lion over at Lincoln to Aspire. And then, of course, doing it the Mustang way. Never mind. Gotta change that, man. I got a middle school mind. I'm not that mature yet. Anyway, what that Aspire leads us to do, well, I'm gonna blush. What that Aspire leads us to do is it provides an opportunity for exactly what Dr. Cole explained earlier, bringing kids back into the fabric of our classrooms, bringing kids back into conversation with each other. It's the lifeblood of learning. It's how we create community, by talking with one another, learning and growing experiences, whether, I mean, the book out there, all you need to know, I learned in kindergarten, you can learn a lot from talking to a 5-year-old, you can learn a lot from talking to a senior, you can learn a lot from talking to a senior citizen. We know this about each other. We're social creatures, so that's our opportunity, is bringing in those norms, going over the safety, going over the fact that, why were we wearing a mask if a student's watching this at home a month ago, and why are we not now? Kids need to understand that whole process, and then making available to them all the opportunities at every school that they have to be involved and engaged. That's our beginning. Then we go to a humanity piece where we're just talking about how are you being cool to each other? How are you being a good friend or a neighbor? ties in with the holidays as we move into gratitude, mindfulness, increasing that positive piece. And then we talk about wellness for the next, pretty much the rest of the year in District 75. We're taking care of each other, we're taking care of ourselves, and then we're building those healthy habits. You know, we're aspiring to bring every part into this. Both boards approved, and we have a meeting tomorrow with the Rush Executive Functioning Team to do a study on sleep, because we know our community told us they're concerned about what, you know, how does this affect the kids? And there's not a lot of research out there on the little ones. So it's an opportunity to learn some healthy habits, because just because the older kids get to go to sleep later because they have all of these activities doesn't mean they should be on their cell phones at 2 in the morning. You know, I mean, that's not good. So just building all of those in. So that's a quick overview of what District 75 looks like. I'm going to turn it back to Anthony for 120.
Well, I appreciate, Mark, that you gave me that segue into, you know, the Mustang way, which is to follow our core values, equity, growth, and collaboration, and all the things that we do to value, you know, to work our students to that. As we start the year, we will focus on who we are. We'll focus on being a Mustang and getting connected to the school, the expectations of the school, and the clubs and activities that are all about there. As we get into the later months of the fall, we will start talking about wellness, gratitude, nutrition, exercise, stress around the holidays. All things that we all deal with, quite frankly, all the time in the school, but we're going to put more of a magnifying glass with our students so that they're also part of that conversation and not just when they have a crisis. When we come back from the new year, we're going to talk about humanity. We're going to talk about enhancing personal relationships, understanding our differences, empathy, a lot of the connections that we have to our aspired goals. And then finally, we end the year with opportunity. We end that because we know that as we get to the end of the year, a lot of our students are getting those summer jobs. We're coming to the service project with the entire town of Mundelein, where we'd like students to be participants in that volunteer work. And so we talk about their role in the community and being a part of it and volunteering their time. And so that's how we will end that entire social emotional journey through this year at the high school. All right. So what that looks like at the high school, if you go to the next slide, what we expect that we will see is that we will see those lessons. We'll have less support calls for students in crisis. That's our goal. And we believe that we'll see better attendance and then overall time, better grades. Okay. We plan on measuring that through our pulse surveys. We were giving a pulse survey. We talk about it as, you know, where are you right now? How you doing? And checking in with students. We did that throughout this last year and a half. We're going to continue to do that to see how things are improving. We expect to have an increase in student activities and athletics, and then consequently classroom engagement and grades.
What is a support call?
A support call would be when we have a student in crisis, we have a social worker or counselor engaged with that crisis. It could be just on the verge of an issue. It could be a very severe issue. Moving on, Mark.
Yes, thank you. So what does this look like at Sandburg? We're going to start out by aspiring to live the code. We already have the advisory program in place. It was in place on most of our scheduling last year, and we're going to maintain that advisory program where we teach the social emotional learning lessons. District 75 uses a second step curriculum. That is a curriculum pre-K through 8th grade, as well as Sandburg rolls in the 7 habits or the Stephen Covey work of the Leader in Me program that the Mechanics Grove, the Wolves have. And then we also have a Rush program for executive functioning resources that we sprinkle in to those lessons as well. So those lessons occur on Wednesday. Our hope is as we move forward, we'll have that program back. And then on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, it's kind of driven through the homeroom and the regular ed classes. So there's a sequenced lesson that all grade levels receive, and then it's reiterated throughout the course of the week. We have our Tiger Code activities, of course. We're going to introduce a program called Taste of Sandburg. It starts with Tiger Check-in. You'll actually see, for if you are a Sandburg student, you'll actually see one of our Tiger Code activities come home. And we want the kids to talk about that code. And then once they get to school, they can, we're going to connect it to aspiring of where they want to be and kind of that ongoing journey that they'll have into high school. We're going to add some activity fairs because as we did our pulse surveys last year and the year before at COVID, before COVID, one of the things we found out was that kids don't always know where to go for information at Sandburg. So even though we do the announcements, even though we have the Power School, even though the coaches and everybody talks about it, we still had some confusion. So we're going to introduce some activity fairs, modeling off what Mendeline 120 does with their freshman incoming class. Just during lunches, just brief shots for our staff to go into the cafeteria and introduce the programs after school, as well as during school, that the kids can get involved in and just become a fabric of the community. And then some community building activities that stem out of the advisory program into lunch. As Dr. Kroll mentioned, we did model at Sandburg some of those pulse surveys, and so we are going to continue that. The other piece we really want to focus on is creating community in the classroom. And so an example of that would be like the Ask 3 and Me. It's been a strategy, a classroom management strategy that's been around for a long time. Basically, it's ask 3 of your buddies before you ask the teacher. You know, just like, where do I get a pencil, or what page did she say to turn to? You know, instead of raising your hand, just ask somebody. And just re-engaging in that to build that sense of community. Things as simple as that style of classroom management, but we want to bring that out in a social, emotional, collaborative manner. We want them to take ownership, we want them to engage in discovery, and we want them to put forth all of that effort. And then, of course, we did run, much like MHS did, we took a cue from them on some athletic pieces, and we had 7 successful programs that we were able to run, but we did see a significant dip in participation. So we are hoping that we can bring that back, and through, you know, just all of those community events, the kids will feel safe and will come back out for all of those after school and club programs. How will we measure success? Of course, the student and staff surveys. Attendance are some classroom engagement that's geared on not only the walkthroughs and the observations that we're going to engage the staff in, as well as the administration that Stacy and Sarah talked about, but our practice marks and our achievement grades, and then our participation rates. So that's what it looks like at Sandburg. I'm going to turn it over to MG with Tanya Fergus.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tanya Fergus. I'm the principal at Mechanics Grove School. It's such an honor to be a part of this community. As some of you, I've started your kids in their school in kindergarten, and now they're graduating or graduated. So it's just such an honor to be here. At Mechanics Grove, the 3rd through 5th grade building, we aspire to lead the pack, and our students created an entire vision for our school, which is leading the pack. We've renamed ourselves as the Wolves, and the P stands for be proactive, the A stands for achieve your goals, the C stands for act with courage, and the K is to choose kindness. That's completely student created because we are a leader in me school, and we follow the 7 habits of being a leader and creating habits that form our children to then eventually go off into the world and come to the high school and move on. So very exciting. How we're going to aspire and achieve all of that is that every single day we've dedicated time in each classroom, each homeroom for Wolf Pack time. And Wolf Pack time is a 20 or so minute time in the day dedicated completely to direct lessons with Lead the Pack with Leader in Me, direct lessons with Second Step, which is our SEL, social emotional learning program. Discussions about what it means to lead the pack. What does it look like in certain areas, in the restroom, in lunchroom, at recess, out in the community, on the bus, all of that. So we dedicate that time every single day, and it is absolutely protected and non-negotiable in every single classroom. We've strategically paired it up with either the very start of the day or coming back in from lunch and recess in a time where something else can't really, take over, oh, we need to extend math today, so we're not gonna do Wolfpack time, not an option at our school. And that again goes with the Leader in Me lessons which is our 7 habits that we follow. Leading into that is the second step lessons, which will be direct instruction, really creating tools and spaces for students to have the support they might need. And when I say spaces, it means even as something like a sensory room or a comfort corner, different phrases you might have heard that are environments. And we're doing the best we can to be as creative as we can and make sure we have those spaces for students for especially times where it may otherwise have resulted in a support call, as an example. So being proactive and having those spaces for some kids to just kind of decompress as they may need. Also, our family communication, we do a second step. We send home regularly our communication to talk about what our lessons are or what we're focusing on that month or that week, depending on what it is. At Mechanics Grove, we'll plan to do wellness check-ins as well. Things like weekly messages everywhere from in the staff bathrooms to in the morning announcements to on my weekly email at the end of the week. Just making sure that we're keeping that at the forefront and really keeping that positive vibe going. And giving the tools and activities. Spirit days in different weeks, very typical in many schools. We'll try to build those in more regularly to kind of lift the spirits and keep that positive vibe going. And then also just the mindfulness activities. So it might be a staff meeting where we're focusing on, deep breaths and, counting to 3 before we react, just like we do with students, something as simple as that. And just like the other schools, how we will measure success is looking at our attendance rates. It was very hard to monitor that during COVID, as you can imagine. Students were on, they were off, disconnected, Wi-Fi, out of town, whatever it might have been. So we want them there and present and at school. So we'll be watching that. There's the support calls again, just monitoring that. And we're going to follow or piggyback from what Mundelein High School did and then Sandburg did last year as well with doing some staff and student surveys and trying to get that pulse every so often. And then last, but absolutely not least, is our leadership roles as a Leader in Me school. We have increased over the last 5 years, over 60% of our students involved in formal leadership roles, whether it be ones they've created on their own or ones they've applied for, or just being involved in their classroom as the note taker or teacher's helper, whatever it might be. So really making sure that we refocus on that and hone in on it to make sure that we're giving students those positive experiences. And now I'll turn it over to Stephanie Drake.
Thank you. I'm Stephanie Drake. I'm the principal of Washington Early Learning Center, and it's really cool to be here for the first time in my career, a year in, but we're here. So Washington will be doing a lot of the other Aspire activities. Like the other buildings, Washington has rebranded itself and we'll be rolling that out this fall with the Aspire to Live and Learn with Eagle Pride. Eagle Pride's been around for a while. It's be safe, be responsible, be respectful. So we will be taking the Eagle Pride and blending the Aspire document and goals into our plan. What that will look like will be an Eagle Hour every morning. It'll be a 20 to 25 minute time where we focus on class meetings, on mindfulness activities, on reviewing rules. We will also be learning the zones of regulation, which is a program that young children learn to identify their emotions. Along with learning to identify them, they learn how to react to them. They learn strategies to work through them. And then they also learn empathy for others and how to help their peers. So with both of those, Eagle Pride Hour, second step lessons, and then the zones of regulation. At the K2 building, we will be doing daily zone check-ins, which relate to those pulse surveys that you've heard about for the high school, but they'll be doing it with smiley faces, putting their name card in a zones color chart to identify a little more on the primary language piece. We're also going to really work hard at using the consistent language of the zones throughout our building so that our K2 students really embrace it and they don't hear empathy, kindness, all these different words that they can't process so that they have a common vocabulary. We're also going to bring back Wellness Wednesdays. Wellness Wednesdays were a thing at Washington prior to COVID. Couldn't figure out how to do them. through Zoom and COVID and everything else. So Wellness Wednesdays could be something as much as challenging every student to do 35 jumping jacks during some course of the day, to take deep breaths while they're walking in the hallways. It could be challenging the staff to take a walk over your lunch hour or drink your 65 ounces of water for the day. So all of those things will be in place so that we're taking care of not only our people and our academics, but also our minds and our bodies. Nothing new on how we're going to measure it. The only difference is that we will have Eagle Pride tickets. And what those are is little pieces of paper that teachers can give to students or classes. And we will collect them. They have the reason they were earned it on it. We're going to look for trends. Do we things that we don't have any Eagle Pride tickets for this? We need to reteach that lesson, or do we have great celebrations to happen? All right. Next slide, please. Mrs. Bennett is going to take all of the Aspire things that we've had way down to the little of our littles. And really what they're going to look at is how to play together, how to be a good friend. And the biggest thing is how to use their words. So they will be doing all of their lessons through that. Second step does go down to the pre-K level, but they're also going to add in some big parent and communication pieces to get family involvement and family education going so that it's reinforced in the home. And then their staff will be doing a lot of PD and team meetings to talk about how to build those skills when kids are playing, when kids are talking to each other, when kids are having big emotions and knowing that that's okay. All right, any questions about goal 1? All right. Next slide, please, Anna. All right. So goal 2 for the principals is all about literacy. There is nothing new here. We are going to arrive at our destination. I got you. I got language here. So Sarah and Stacy shared the Common Core Priority Standard that will be our destination. And that is really working with informational texts, being able to ask and answer questions, look for more information, make inferences, make analyses, and all of those pieces. We're going to dive deep. Next slide, please. We're going to dive deep to get there through really focusing ND 75 in the mini lesson. So we're taking one piece of that map that Sarah and Stacy showed you, and we're going to dig deep into it. So our staff will be focusing on the mini lesson. Principal and staff walkthroughs will be focusing on the mini lesson. Let's make sure that we're on the right track, that our car is running right, that we're all going in the same destination to meet our destination. And then we're super excited to be back in a year to share with you how our trip was. And that maybe even show some vacation pictures of our destination. Are there other questions about the literacy goal? Thank you.
I guess I have kind of a general question, and it's, since you guys are driving the car at the moment, you get it. We're talking basically about kids, staff all being back in there. What would the plan be for the parent or the family that does not want their student back in the classroom, and vice versa? How do we handle that situation?
So in June, we went over the remote learning options, and we really have what we would kick to then is a homebound tutoring option for the kids. We did have on the very last slide, I believe it was on 120 as well as D75, that scenario. We don't know if we're going to run into it, or we don't know if we're going to have a kid who is in medical crisis and can't come to school, and then we would move it to a homebound tutoring full program. that was detailed then, and basically it would be kid dependent. And it would basically run 5 hours per week, just like we would normally handle homebound tutoring pre-COVID.
Let me take it another step further. You have the student that wants to be there, the family doesn't want them there, and vice versa
So
with that one.
fortunately, the plans that we do have in place, should this happen or a student needs to go on quarantine, even though that's not as probable anymore because of the vaccinations and everything. But should we have this situation, we have created a scenario how we'll support them with a case manager and a team of people. So they will still feel connected. The classroom teacher will actually be directly involved in planning and creating materials for that child, so that if and when they come back, there is no learning loss. It's a smooth transition back in.
Because now you're dealing with the conflict within the family, you know.
Right, which
I want to
we
be
can't
there,
control
no, you're
that,
not gonna go there.
Right.
Yeah.
And with regards to your statement about students that don't want to be here, but parents that say you're going back to school, I think that's really why we put these plans together. So I'll speak for the littles. We know there's going to be some separation anxiety happening. I mean,
We saw it this past year.
We saw it this past year, but some of them have been home for 18 months now. Why can't I just learn with mom in the basement? And I think that's where all of our lessons and activities and calm corners and supports are going to come into play.
And I don't think that's just at the D75 level. I think that's gonna happen in the 120. And
But I think that to that point, I think we know that those are gonna have to be conversations. This is a national conversation we're all having. And then, and on top of that, our counselors, social workers and psychs, if it gets to gets past those conversations and it's now talking about school refusal, I mean, they are trained in those conversations and working through those situations.
And then one last point that I hesitate to bring it up, but what happens if we go back the other direction? I know that we've had the plans over this past year and a half. Do we have to massage that plan that if we do have to shut down again, that we can just ease right into it?
So the nice thing is we've learned so much. I mean, over the course of this year, I think we'd really be able to step back in fairly easily. I'll use that word in quotes, and realize the supports we have to put in place to keep it going. Thankful for Dan Crow that we are where we are with technology, that we know if we have to step back there, we'll all take a really good deep breath and step back in, but we at least will know what we're doing.
If we've learned anything too in this past year, for the most part, children are extremely resilient. I mean, yes, there will be repercussions, there will be moments, there will be, restorative restart that we need to really focus on, but for the most part, they are extremely resilient.
I think the students are probably more resilient than the parents.
Yeah, sometimes too.
Just a quick thought. This is an investment in our community and you can feel it. And there's continuity in the educational care that these two districts are putting forth, and you can feel it, whether it's from the littles all the way up to the transitioning young adults. So to sit around this table and to see it as a plan and to be excited about it, to see it get executed and to know that it can reach every one of our families, whether they're a 5th grader in 75 or a 12th grader over at 120, that's a pretty neat thing. And it'll affect the families that are members of 120, but not 75. I think you've done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a
Thank you
statement
very
of where we
much.
are today. It's a statement beyond COVID or prior to COVID, but it's, well done.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Jeff. Up next, we have an exciting program, the Aspire Academy. Up to do for that presentation will be Jill Unger and Larry Calhoun.
Good evening, I'm Larry Calhoun, the Fine and Applied Arts Department here at Mundelein High School. I'm Jill Unger, the District 75 Teaching and Learning Coordinator. And tonight we are pleased to introduce you to a joint venture between our districts, the Aspire Education Academy, which is a high school course pathway and internship for students interested in becoming bilingual educators. So in schools today, staff demographics in terms of cultural and linguistic diversity differ from student body demographics. We as educators know it is important for students to see a reflection of themselves in their teachers and role models. The field of education in general faces challenges recruiting culturally and linguistically diverse educators. The current best practice for recruiting these types of educators is to actually develop our own, and the Aspire Education Academy will help us put this into practice. Mundelein is already a place where former students seek to return. District 120 currently has 20 certified staff members that are Mundelein High School graduates. About 80 staff members currently working in Lincoln, Washington, Mechanics Grove, and Carl Sandburg Middle School both live and work in Mundelein District 75. And this is a unique strength to the community strength within our district.
Another secondary driver to this was Mundelein High School is shifting kind of our protocol, our paradigm for guidance and counseling and course selection. Some of you guys heard me talk before about a very intentional thing we're putting in place where we're facilitating and supporting student self-discovery, so to speak, and then catering to the individual student for career discovery and research and that kind of thing. Well, what we're also going to do is start talking about course selection in terms of an educational pathway to the student's own post-secondary vision for themselves. When I talk about pathways, we're talking about more than just a package of courses. It's certainly that. But we also, for all of these pathways that we're building, we're also trying to facilitate work embedded experiences where they're taking the content knowledge and having practical application. That includes internships and all kinds of job shadowing, and also some dual credit opportunities. We have a number of these things already in place. We're trying to have pathways, at least one in each of the nationally recognized 16 career clusters. We have it in business, marketing, finance, management. We have it in information technology, programming. We have it in manufacturing, engineering, and some others. Now we'll have one for education. This has been a very cooperative effort between District 75 and 120. That was probably the easiest part. I think everybody we've talked to was excited and gung ho to be a part of this. The committee members represent a wide range of roles and responsibilities. We have 11 committee members from District 75, 9 from District 120, and 2 that are shared services. We've divided our committee into 5 subcommittees, each tasked with specific goals that lend themselves to the overall progress. The first subcommittee has 2 main agenda items. Is number 1, how to recruit the students that we want for this. Nobody's going to be excluded from this program. But because of some of the drivers that Jill discussed, we want to really emphasize and do more than just tear down barriers. We want to support and facilitate dual language students and students from diverse cultures to be part of this program. Their second task is to come up with, for lack of a better word, a marketing plan. How do we make sure that students and parents and the community are aware of this opportunity?
So Mundelein High School has the Educators Rising Club already in place, and there will be opportunities for this club to collaborate with Carl Sandburg Middle School clubs, such as the Homework Club and the Community Service Club that's already existing at Carl Sandburg. One upcoming example is there will be a peer tutoring boot camp for students that are involved in the Homework Club and the Educators Rising Club together between our districts on August 14th. And our committee also is working towards other scaffolded experiences related to the field of education.
The third committee is more the nuts and bolts of the pathway courses themselves. What will those courses contain? There will be a progression starting the freshman year and going through the senior year capstone course. What's the progression? What colleges are we going to partner with for dual credit? And then in addition to that, what other courses lend themselves to this? And outside of the specific education courses. For instance, we've got foreign language up there. We want to really emphasize the dual language part of this particular program. I think that's it for that one. I apologize.
Okay, next is our capstone internship. And this is for seniors in the program. This is what the students are working up to in their coursework all along. District 75 teachers will be recruited and trained on how to best host a student that is in the academy. And the Aspire Academy students will have a diversified experience within the internship. They'll have an opportunity to work with elementary school students, secondary age students, special education students, and also a choice based on their interest in their last rotation.
And the final committee is the scholarship and tracking committee. We want to have a scholarship specific to Mundelein High School for students to complete this. That scholarship will go to at least one student each year, we hope. This committee has the task of finding the source for funding of that. It's got either a sponsorship or grant funds, that kind of thing. But then maybe even more importantly, we want this committee to come up with the system for tracking these students once they leave Mundelein High School. We want to track them through their college career, make sure that they're invited back here. They have a guaranteed student teaching opportunity here. Tanya Fergus just mentioned to us right before we walked up here, she just hired a bilingual Mundelein grad to teach at Mechanics Grove. Our future teachers are in our classrooms. This program just makes sure that we capture them and give them the best opportunity possible. Next slide. This is our kind of our map for implementation. The clubs we mentioned are already in place. They're already collaborating, working together. In September, we hope to have the courses all outlined. That's the teaching specific courses. We hope to have that all outlined, the content, who the dual credit partners are, so that can go into our course catalog. And then that committee with the marketing plan, they need to have their plan ready for implementation. The implementation of that plan will happen in November. We're kind of waiting to November because we want to be 30 to 60 days prior to course selection. And we want to really have kind of a blitz in November, making sure that our students and our families become aware of this opportunity. And then December, January is where course selection usually takes place. We do have one added item there, something we haven't really done in the past. We're going to go to Carl Sandburg Middle School targeting January 14th we're calling it electives fair here. We want to make it more of a pathways fair. We're over there talking to the Carl Sandburg students about the different pathways available, career educational pathways available at Mundelein High School.
And in the fall of 2022, students will begin the pathway courses. In the spring of 2024, we'll begin our training for the internship cooperating teachers in District 75. In fall of 2024, we'll have our first internship students. And in the spring of 2025, we'll have our first Aspire Academy scholarships awarded to students leaving the program and going on to college. And in the fall of 2028, we will host our first Aspire Academy alumni student teachers and interview for possible candidates for our buildings.
Hopefully some of this is readily apparent. We wanted to list some of the advantages. First of all, students will see the districts and the schools invest in their future. If we're doing this right and the student has this vision for themselves, they're going to see that the districts and the teachers and are fully supporting that. It's going to especially support those culturally diverse and dual language speakers. It's an opportunity for work embedded experience that the students don't currently get, at least in this particular pathway. Dual credit opportunities, and then it contributes to that shift that I mentioned. We're really trying to make it Mundelein High School. We start talking about courses as a pathway to the students' post-secondary vision for themselves.
Additionally, it guarantees students student teaching opportunity in their home community. It leads to a future staff that better reflects our students and community, and it enhances our shared service model already and starting this whole venture together. And we've really worked to build our shared service model and build camaraderie between the shared ownership between our two districts. And teachers throughout our two districts will feel a sense of pride and fulfillment in providing this opportunity for students while strengthening their profession. Teachers love giving back, and this is one way that we'll do so as a community.
Question.
Comment question. Is there a similar program like this in any other place in the state, country, whatever, that you've used as a model or kind of got some information from? Or are we on the cutting edge of doing this?
In some ways, we'll be on the cutting edge because our program is really developing bilingual educators. Currently, there's a program that we have been working with to model after in District 214, which is Buffalo Grove, Arlington Heights, Prospect Heights. It's big, okay. And I think Huntley has something similar to.
Only in Dundee Crown. We've looked at actually several.
Okay.
We're not the first. We're gonna be the best. We're just not the first.
Right.
That's great, because then we could be the model. for others.
Yeah, and what Jill just mentioned, I think it makes us unique. We're really targeting diversity on this. We're not gonna exclude anyone. We're gonna fully support and try to make sure that any student that represents the diversity in our student body has access to this program.
I think there's some loan forgiveness options too by working in the district, right?
Yes, I think there's loans forgiveness just going into teaching, but some other things that I can't fully speak to because I don't know all the details yet. There's scholarship opportunities tied to that pathway designation on the transcript that we're gonna have going. We talked about having a scholarship here, but one school that I know for sure already, NIU, if a student has completed the educational pathway, they have automatic acceptance into the College of Education there with access to scholarships they wouldn't otherwise have. So I think we'll see more and more of that, but I don't know how to quantify that just yet.
I remember talking to Andy a while back about student loans that are getting right off because of fulfilling requirements to teach districts.
Well, I'd love to hear this because I know there's already a teacher shortage. And I mean, we may not experience this as extremely here as they are in the southern part of the state, but to see that you're giving the kids the exposure of how this can be done and how it can look and the community that they know that they're coming into, you know, whether they have family here, or they just have the best high school experience ever.
I think we'll see a lot of benefit down the road out of this. And I think the program will be full. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we get to move a little bit here. So I do hope as board members, when you came on and selected to want to be a board member, that you were hoping at some point you would start seeing some of the synergy that we're seeing tonight. And that I hope what you're leaving with today after hearing the shared goals, you clearly understand the direction that we do want to be able to go. And now that you also have a mechanism to make sure we are going in that direction, the passion that we have. So thank you, team. Phenomenal job, as always. Thank you. So with that, District 120, you do have executive session, so I'm asking you to stay here. For D75 team, we're gonna go down into the main area because we have more open session stuff to do. What will take place, each district will hear their specific goals for each district going into this next year, okay? So Ken, go and make transition. Team members, if you don't have a presentation, you are good to go home. For some of you, enjoy your vacations. Please bring your name tags, yes. So and we gotta get Kevin transferred to the other screen.
Forward right now. So, yeah, you were there for that. Okay, so.
Good evening.
Good evening.
If you're ready, I'm ready.
Okay, everybody ready to get started? Are we good for online? Okay.
All right, so I wanted to revisit our district goals for this past year. And then introduce our new goals for the coming year. So we can go to the next slide. As we try to select our goals every year, we reflect on our core values and we try to select goals that work towards these values continuously. Our goals still have some components that never change. And then there's some other elements that you'll see this year we're going to transition to that will be much more focused on growth, much more focused on a core value of growth. Okay, next slide. The theme, we typically have a theme. Last year's was survival. Quite frankly, right? At this time last year, we were wondering if we were going to open. We were planning on different schedules. At some point, we had reflected that we were probably going to open sometime in the fall. All right, so those are all things that we had gone through. You as a board, us as a building, and we struggled with throughout. So quite frankly, our goals were just to keep ourselves focused on the core indicator, the core goal indicators during the pandemic. So as we go to the next slide, we always have an ELA and a math proficiency goal. The ELA English was to increase 10% in each subgroup on the PSAT and the SAT reading, writing, and STAR testing. The message for the first two in this and math is going to be pretty much the same. The state, if you go to the next slide, the state canceled the PSAT. So 2 of the 3 grades that do state testing did not do state testing. So that's data that we just don't have. So we have no reflection on where those students were from their freshman to their sophomore year. And there'll be a gap as we move forward. As we continue through that, the SAT data is just not available until later this month. That's what we're hearing from the state. So we still don't have our SAT data for our juniors. So that's still unknown. We did give the STAR test, both in math and English. We typically do that every year. We do it in October and then late April, early May. We did do that. In October, we were completely remote. So the results are completely all over the board. Okay, we have students that didn't do it. We had students that never responded to doing it. We have students that did this test like they did a lot of their tests, especially in October, so we have very poor data coming out of our STAR tests. The STAR tests were supposed to be confirmations of the goals that are the ELA standards that you see out of the SAT as well. So we like to use the SAT, the STAR, to support what we're seeing in the SAT, as the SAT is the core component that we use. So I don't have any data to reflect on for that. If we go to math, the next one, that was to increase a 2% increase in each subgroup in the PSAT and the SAT and the common assessments math score. So go to the next slide, the message is the same. Okay. We did have common assessments in math, but as you heard through last year, either from parents or from us and in some of our reflections of last year, we were finding that the authenticity or the having students do it truly without any type of assistance, we had problems with that. So that was all over the board. So we don't have data for the math goal either.
Question,
Yes.
these increases that you're aiming to get, are you talking about increases from one cohort to the next year's cohort, or from a
Great
cohort
question.
in PSAT to their score in the SAT?
No, since we are testing students in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, we're looking at the 9th grade cohort going into 10th grade and looking to see if those subgroups increased 2% in math.
So it's the same student group, you want to see that
Correct.
kind of increase.
We want to compare apples to apples.
Thank
We want to make sure that we're looking at the 9th grader as they're a 10th grader and then as an 11th grader.
who actually set these goals and why is one lower than the other?
I do that with Stacy and department chairs along the way. It has a reflection on sometimes where our data currently is, as well as how we believe things are going to improve with maybe some of the current programming that we're doing.
So hypothetically, would that be, we're already at a pretty strong point in math, going up a little bit is gonna be a stretch anyway.
Correct. Ninth grade, next slide. This one is a ninth grade on track. So this is looking at just our freshmen in their freshman year. Ninth grade on track is defined by the state as having a student not having more than one semester of an F. Okay, so if they have an F for one semester, they're still on track. If they have any more than that, they're not on track. So we wanted to see a 5% increase in our Hispanic subgroup data. This is our data for this year. Go to the next slide, please. So we had 85% on track and 15% off track. This is 3 times higher than last 2 years. So just because of the world that we were living in, and where this data is coming, we had significant number of students who either did not attend school, or when they were attending virtually, we were having a hard time getting them to complete their studies. So we did have an increase in the number of F grades for our freshman students. This is the same story for a lot of our schools in Lake County. Everybody saw this. When I was talking to my colleagues at other schools, everybody saw an increase. Now, if you look at this, this is, when we say 3 times higher, and so, in African-American, we're talking about 8 students total in the freshman class that fall, so we had 1 student or less last year, I believe, that was failing. So
can you go back one slide?
Yes.
A 5% increase in Hispanic subgroup in ninth grade on track. So, and now go back again or forward.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that 5% turned into.
So last year.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So the goal was set.
I'm sorry, no, actually, this is 26%. We wanted, this last year, that goal was 3 times less. So we were around, so we were looking about 20 kids out of 230. That were off track.
So we went up a lot.
We went up a lot.
Up a lot.
Even
But we
aside,
went up in every area. Every student group other than Asian went up.
even aside from what actually happened, and I know why, you just explained why,
Yeah.
what happened, but back to the goal just seems very modest for a growth goal where we believe that we want everyone to achieve.
So if I remember correctly, the Hispanic subgroup was around 8% or 9% in the past. So we were trying to bring that down to around 4 to 5%. Is it arbitrary? Yes, to an extent. We do set, we look at a goal and we say, well, this is where the hot spot is. This is where we want to focus. And then we try to put time and attention and resources to that. Last year, we were trying to put time and attention and resources everywhere. It didn't matter what subgroup you were in, we were trying to attend to that. But across the board, in every one of these categories, they are 3 times higher than they were last year in terms of not meeting. This red column is 3 times higher than it was semester 1 of last year, which is the last time we measured this.
Can we go ahead and assume based on this data that what we're also going to see at the upper grades last year was a decrease in A's and B's and an increase in C's, D's, and F's?
You could probably assume that. That's not something that we usually measure.
Right.
Okay, so,
Universally.
so we're gonna try and get back on track.
We're gonna try to
for
get
this
back
year.
on track. This is a component that we will not let go of. This is actually a state requirement. Ninth grade in track is a state requirement. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with next year's goals.
So just, can we back up a little bit?
Yeah.
This off track, these are failed students who have at least one failing grade, correct?
They usually have more than, they have
More than one.
they have 2 semesters or more of failing grades.
Of F's failing grades.
Correct.
So by what requirement are we required to give grades? What governs that requirement?
You're saying F
I mean, you could,
versus
like, you could
pass-fail.
do pass fail, but at some point you have to pass the class to get credit.
Right, and
I'm
we
just-
have a
Like some
grade
level
point
of
average.
mastery, but what is that level of mastery?
Well,
Is it
and
a
I,
60%, is it a 50%?
and if anything is gonna make us kind of question that, it's
Yeah.
what we just went through.
Yeah.
And I'm just asking the
Yeah.
question to understand what's the long-term impact of these Fs?
And I think for those of you who have been on the board for more than a year, you've heard from Stacy about how we have looked at our grading practices over the last 2 years and some of the things that we've started to work we have changed, and we continue to make that journey in our grading practices to make learning reflective in the grade rather than the grade being as arbitrary as it could be. And that's some of the, there's a lot of conversations in our sister schools in the area that have had that conversation that we have benefited from. We continue to work with. That is inherent. Like, how do you grade? And ultimately, years ago, the boards decided we would get away from class rank, because at what point could you be confident that there was a very strong support behind why a student received an A versus an A+, or an A versus an A-?
And on this end, the other end, I'm just worried about how hopeful are these students going to be that they can be successful?
So let me go to the next slide, because I do address a little bit of it here.
Your intervention.
So as we have gone through the last year, we did provide instructional aid support in our core classes, 9th grade core classes. Instructional aides working with students who, as they were failing, we knew that we were intervening with them. Some of those students pulled it out. Some of those students may have been virtual. They never attended. There are parts here in our community that just did not attend school. Or they stopped attending school. We did have home visits throughout the winter and spring to attend to those students to see if we could get them back into participating, right? Because, and some of those students that did, I remember personally talking with one student in his driveway with his father. He had 3 Fs at the time. He was able to, now this was an upperclassman, but he was able to turn all those into passing grades. Our staff bent over backwards constantly throughout the year to make that happen. So it could not have happened without our staff being very flexible. We did hire this summer an summer school assistant principal who was focused on the students who were very close to passing their class, maybe with like a 55% or 50%, but were given an incomplete by their teacher saying, you're close. If in the next 3 weeks you go through this program, which the assistant principal worked on with these teachers that were remediating this work, if you complete this work, then you'll get a passing grade. And so that was one of the things that was taken care of in the last 3 weeks, the 3 weeks immediately following the end of the semester. There were also students who received an audit. Remember we presented to you, you approved our request that instead of students receiving an F for this year, they received an audit. It still has the same impact on their GPA. It still means that they did not achieve the requirements to graduate if they got an audit in science, for example. they still need to take that science credit in order to graduate. If there was a way that we could get students into summer school and to complete that audit, get them into credit recovery as soon as possible, that was the other thing that our assistant principal was working on, our summer school assistant principal was working on this summer. Some kids started that work, started to get that going. Other students, again, we still have not been persuasive enough to get them to come back and start to recover that credit. So that's where then the last bullet, you'll see there, what we've worked on for next year. We did receive stimulus money, COVID stimulus money, to assist with the learning loss. Where we've put that money is in 2 certified staff members for intervention and 2 instructional aides for intervention, where they're going to have a caseload. They're going to target those students, and they were going to continue to work with them to support them along the way in the courses that they do have, so that we stop that failure and start to reclaim credit, or at least with the classes that they should have as a sophomore or as a junior for the coming year, that you don't continue to a culture of failure.
Yeah, and so just to summarize the,
Yeah.
where my question was coming from is, these are students who at the high school level have not yet experienced success. And they already feel like hopeless. That, yeah, like they can't go to college, they can't get into community college, why try? That's the worry that I have about that.
I wrote down the word hopeful. Do you remember when we, in class of 2020 and class of 2021, both had a reduced
Yes.
graduation requirements, right? Otherwise, we would have had how many kids not graduate? And when we did that, kids had a little hope. Oh, okay, I should try in these couple of classes because I will graduate, rather than just throwing in the towel and
Giving up.
giving
rolling
up
over.
and
Right.
being hopeless. But what you just said, I mean, I guess I didn't think for far enough down the road. I mean, for these kids that are off track, when you say off track, am I a freshman that's failed 2 classes, so I'm currently not on track for graduation, or have I failed both semesters or anywhere in there?
Anywhere in there.
Anywhere in there. So that off track is I failed 2 or more courses.
Correct. And in the data that, when you break the data down further, we have students, freshmen who failed anywhere from 2 semesters to 7 courses,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So,
so then-
because they didn't attend, or they gave up at some point. So we do have, I mean, they're not very large numbers, but there are students that
There's
fall
a
into those,
handful, yeah.
each one of those categories. Failed 2 classes, 3 classes, 4 classes.
Well, I think it's great that you had a summer school assistant
Yeah.
principal who identified those kids that were on the edge, but they could help them. Because I don't think it's helpful to bring it back for a whole nother year if they were 1 or 2 classes at a 55. So
Right.
bravo to get that.
And that is a process that we've done at the end of each semester for the last couple of years. So that is something that we've been doing. We continue to do it, but this allowed for somebody to be focused on those students, create a relationship, allow Stacy and me and Mike to go on a vacation and not be in the building. There's a little break there for everybody else, but this person was focused on those students and connected with them. So, and during summer school time. Lisa, the end question that you had, just repeat.
No, it isn't a question as much as I know for the last couple of meetings, you guys have been talking to us about how you're thinking about the mental health of the students, and you're being very proactive about reconnecting students, and with a special attention to the freshmen, but also the sophomores who have not connected to the school. I know you guys are all over it. I just know from students who live in my home who did not perform at their normal level, that we're fighting this, it's all lost, you know, no longer premier college, no longer college, no
Right.
longer, and they're feeling that at the 9th grade level, going into sophomores.
Hmm.
And there are many of, not a huge number, but I mean, it's a sizable number. So it's not only, it's great we're connecting with them. I just wanted, I
That's a-
want them to have
good to hear.
hope that there's a future for them.
That's a good reflection for us to take back as we start, especially the social emotional lessons and the developmental guidance lessons that come from our guides.
You know, even, I'm sorry, I'm all off on a tangent now. You know, the college thing, okay? You know, I work with people who went to Northwestern and Brown, and I went to Southern. No disrespect to any other Salukis in the room, but I turned out okay. You know, I don't know if we need to let these kids know that it's okay. Yeah, Northwestern is fabulous, but you can be okay if you go to ISU instead of U of I.
Yes.
You know, and I know that's a status thing with some of the kids is, you know, what school you're going to and, you know, how does that look? But that's sad that you've got a college bound kid thinking that life is over at the 9th grade.
The other piece of
It's
that
ninth grade.
too is we have an obligation, like, I'll just say very honestly, like I had one or two teachers say, this year's a total loss, we just have to get through it.
Yeah.
I did not take that well, because it's not just we got to get through it, because for the students, it was a life altering experience. And there's a lot of students that had a life altering experience, and we need to figure, not just us, but I mean nationally, we got to figure out how to address that, because it's not okay to say to these kids, you know, it's not your fault, it just happened, do the best you can, but that thing you really wanted to have is gone now.
And we have to look at
And-
too, for some kids, college was the end goal, but for some of these kids, they maybe didn't go to school because they had to go to work.
Exactly.
And I think
there's
that's
so many
that's
things.
a different scenario of, they weren't worried about going to college, they were worried about what's paying out of the house, kind of help mom and dad out. So I think, like you said, there's a lot of layers to
Are
this.
there, I don't know, I mean, sorry, I'm off on another tangent here. You know, is there any way to, almost like an intercession class, you know, is there credit available for work experience? Is there credit available if in the evening is there like a little counted as a health credit doing some, you know, kind of mental health stuff or regrouping sort of things?
So
So you don't feel like you compelled, like you have to
No,
respond to
I
that
wanna-
now, because
I
I
wanna-
just went to.
you're
left
gonna
field.
see a little bit of change in the goals for the coming year and why that they're going the direction they're gonna go. But a work study program is something that I have requested that will be coming to you in October when you approve the next course guide. That is a component that we've been missing, that I've asked for somebody who has experience to help me create that, so we can offer that for the coming school year. And that would be that would be one of the things that you're addressing.
Or like
there.
participating in so
Right.
many social emotional workshops throughout the building, maybe that's a quarter credit somewhere.
So
Like a way
the
to
other thing I
log the
want,
hours and get credit.
one of the things that you'll see later on in the graduation piece, that we don't have graduation data, because graduation data, we typically give you in February. That's when we get it in October from the state, and we deliver it to you and analyze it for February. But one of the things that I have is just a check that we have been participating in for the purpose of improving graduation. And goes to your point, Lisa, is we have made a relationship with CLC to have that college counselor in building. That was a pilot with us, with CLC. After the year that they had, this was not last year, the year before, of success that we had, CLC expanded that program is now in 8 schools, doing the same thing. Our results from that year of having that CLC college coach in the building is tremendous, because the individual at that time was working hand in hand with our college counselor. And so they were able to cover both bases, and they answered a lot of those types of questions. And I think overall kept that I have no chance, and this is not really a choice, really dispelled that. But to your point, I think this is a conversation piece that I will bring back to my team as well.
Yeah, so the all is not lost.
Right.
We're getting back on track. is just a message we have to make sure the students, and
Right.
maybe in some cases their parents hear.
Yeah, I think we heard, I'm not saying it's not happening. It's almost that we have to get there in order for it to happen too
Right.
now, because we heard Larry talk about it at the last board meeting, and there are new opportunities and new ways to look at aptitude, and there are new ways and new opportunities to look at the curriculum connections, and there are new ways and opportunities to take that 9th grade and 10th grade group that didn't have that backbone of familiarity and transition, and to reintegrate that opportunity into their freshman and sophomore years. So part of the, and this entire night, we've talked about mental health and wellness, which is what we asked to be considered over the last year and a half, even before we got into COVID. So
Well, as
we
Jamie-
expected these to be terrible scores
Yeah,
and results.
I
and
feel
they
bad
are.
you even have to go through this. Look at this goal, we didn't meet it.
Right.
Look at this goal, we didn't meet it. Like,
I think what we need
like,
to see is the
is there
bounce
like a glutton
back.
for punishments up there?
Well, I appreciate you saying. that. I was dreading this. I
Why
was
are you-
completely dreading this.
What the heck?
Well, and I
Horrible thing
but-
for you to be doing right
But
now.
Peter is setting this up perfectly for next year's goal for him. I will tell you that, because what my years as director of curriculum, the drumbeat was always, what is your ACT score? You need to have the 25. It was the 25 beat. That was all that was being preached constantly. And the blowback from all of us in education was, listen, we have successful students who are not going to get a 25 on their ACT, but they're going to be very successful in a career. And they're going to be very successful in their life as a citizen, but it doesn't come down to that GPA of a 4 point. It could be a 2.8, and that's just great. And these students, these criteria, they broke that down. What did that look like? And actually, that is the goal that you're going to see for the coming year.
Well, yeah, it doesn't take into account what they gained, because
Right.
there is certainly something that every student gained from going through this experience. It's just, and it's nothing that we can measure.
And that's what I was gonna say, because Jamie said there were some rainbows, and Tanya mentioned it too, how resilient our kids are. And I think parents have to model it, and teachers had to model it. It wasn't just a getting through the year, it was like, you know what, we've got handed a difficult situation.
What
How
we
can
draw
we
on?
personally handle it? And you know what, sometimes it's hard, but we've all found out, like, you guys did 13 schedules. What if we had ever asked you to do 13 schedules before, you would have been like, you're crazy, I can't do that. But you know what, you got through it, so.
So let me
Next slide.
go to the next.
Next slide, keep going, we got some things.
Go ahead,
Yes,
Stacy.
no, it's directly related to Lisa's comments. So one of the things that I did want to mention in terms of being hopeful, so what we see with students, particularly freshman to sophomore or sophomore to junior, they have a very similar academic experience. So they fail a class, right? And they either retake it, and we try to avoid giving them the same teacher, right? Or they do something online, which isn't always great for all students. And then they really start to get hopeless because they struggle, right? And so we're doing we're kind of alternative geometry and alternative earth science. These are two classes that a lot of our sophomores have difficulty with. And then what we're seeing is students who took biology who are struggling. So what we're doing on Tech or Earth Science is we're giving that teacher like free reign to experiment. The teacher we've hired is pretty well versed in project-based learning. We actually ended up at her school in New York. They do all these amazing things where they connect the community and the projects. And it's totally different. So we're gonna try it. And freshman students who did poorly in science will be in this earth science class. And then students who failed earth science last year, we're also, rather than having them do an online program, we have chosen some students to put in this alternative program to see if they do better. We're doing the same thing. It's a small cohort, Yeah, we'll track the data. And then the other thing is geometry. And so we are adding project-based learning to geometry. We're gonna put some construction pieces in it, but there's also some really cool, we've been working with the math department here at Evanston. There's some really cool things that you could pair up with, like they're pairing up geometry, the project lead the way teacher. So we're trying to do more hands-on project-based stuff, but a different experience, because you're exactly right. that they're just constantly being forced into a traditional educational setting, which for a lot of kids, and most of our kids, it works really well, but for some of them it doesn't, and then they want to give up. So we're trying something really different with these courses next year.
That's a
Fingers crossed.
positive that's come out of this.
Yeah,
Right
absolutely.
there. Mhm.
Huge.
Sorry, Anthony.
Nope, that's good. Thank you very much. Okay, let's quickly address this. This is the 5% increase in activities and athletics for the Hispanic subgroup. That is just the group that we continue to want to involve more. If you look at the data, the last time that we collected this data was semester 1 participation rates. That was pre-pandemic, then we had the pandemic and we didn't do anything but do schedules. So we were at 38% then. We ended last year with 37% participation. So one semester, we are pretty much at the same rate of one semester participation at the end of last year. So again, we took a hit, but at the same time, you got to remember, if you kind of keep in mind, next slide, we had, partial in-person participation in school, limited participation due to remote learning in the fall, change in addition of summer season, as well as the overlap of the seasons. We had conflicts where students couldn't be in one athletic, they might be multiple sport athletes, but their sports were either in the same season now because of the multiple seasons, or they were overlapping. We had students who were finishing football. I remember this with Sam Tate. He was 3 weeks into the next sport, and in order for him to compete in the next season, he had to be at that practice. But he's still in football, and they still have 2 games left, 3 games left, right? So that was very difficult for our athletes.
But
Many
don't
of
you
our
count participation as they did one sport, it counts, or
Yes.
does it?
Well, we actually track that they participated in any sport.
Right.
And then we do track multiple sports just for that.
Yeah, because I would say, because the conflicting one isn't gonna affect your participation, because you check the box, they participated in the sport.
But then we also know that we also track whether they were in multiple sport athletes as
But
well.
those percentages
But this is,
showed
that
one
is,
sport
that is
or-
one sport,
Gotcha.
correct.
Yeah.
Well, Hispanic student decline too. The Hispanic population in Mundelein had the highest percentage of COVID cases too. So
Correct.
I'm sure that played into kids not being able to participate as much.
We did have students who stayed in their club and travel leagues and did not participate in the public school leagues. And we had, and then we had some sports that just didn't have state series, and some of our students, they're like, well, I don't feel like I'm really shooting for anything. I don't think that was a common refrain from a lot of our athletes. A lot of our athletes, they wanted to compete, so. Graduation rate. Again, if you go to the next slide, and next slide, with 3% increase at all graduation group. Go to the next slide, please. We don't have that information. That's what I'll present to you in February. See if we hit that goal. But just to remind you, next slide, these are some of the things that we have in place. Again, we lowered for last year, the class of 2020, we lowered their graduation requirements. For the class of 2019, we had there was the state imposed some relief for them. So that had happened. Those are temporary, but they had happened. The summer school example we talked about, and the CLC transition coach we talked about. So those things do assist in our graduation rate overall, but we'll talk about that later. Let's talk about this coming year. Next slide. You are going to see our goals are going to be reflective of what the state has passed as our college and career readiness indicators. They passed this, if you go to the next slide, please, in 2018. They revised them a little bit in 2019. They have been collecting this data now since then in pieces. They started with pieces and then they added more and more as the 2 years have gone on. So we will have some historical data already that have been collected by the state over the last 2 years. Actually, this was going to be our goal a year prior, but we obviously went off track due to the pandemic. So going to the next slide, this is in alignment with the State Board of Ed and what we call the Every Student Succeeds Act. But it also, more importantly to me, it connects to our local areas of interest, internships, apprenticeships, and those type of things, giving kids other ways of finding out what they're good at and giving them an opportunity, an open door to explore that in high school when it's free and there's a lot of opportunities. So if you go to the next slide, you're going to see the playbook data is still going to have these core academic indicators. These don't change. These have been our core academic indicators for the last few years. They're because the state set that back in 2018. We're not going to lose any of those. You're going to still see those. Okay, so the conversations we already had, we'll continue to monitor those rates. Next slide. Some of these will continue to be monitored, and we have had them in the past. Chronic absenteeism is a little change in definition. And of course, it wasn't really defined by the state as of the beginning of last year. And we'll have to figure out where they're at with that now. Climate survey participation was a new element. And then GPA and attendance, those are things that we've always monitored. So we'll continue to monitor those. Now, those are things that students are going to be responsible for. As we go to the next piece, this is the part that schools said, hey, we're more than a test score. Our students are more than a test score. And we have very successful students out there doing other things, but you're not capturing that. And so as Larry mentioned, that we're transitioning to a pathways perspective in our course guide. You're going to see that as we go into October. We're looking at defining for students which one of the 8 pathways or the 16 national career pathways do you want to be a part of to learn more about. Not that you're committing to a career, you're exploring. If you come away and say, I absolutely hate this, you've learned something, and now you can go and say, I'm not going to waste time and energy in courses that talk about that. I'm going to go this direction in the areas that I do appreciate. That was a whole discussion about the U-Science presentation from last month. So there is a element there that an endorsement. We're exploring how do we define that as a high school for each student. Or it's a matter of saying, hey, do you have an academic indicator in English and math for your junior and senior year? Do you identify with the career area of interest by the end of your sophomore year? Or do you have 3 career ready indicators during your junior senior year? So this component is completely new in that area of career exploration. So if you go to the next slide, the state has defined this all out. So if you're saying, okay, you need to have an academic indicator for English and math, these are all the ones that you can choose. If you got a grade of C or better in an honors or AP course in math, you fulfilled that one requirement. That's all that the state is asking for, that happens. Next year, we will have a transition. We've had a transitional math class. We will have a transitional English class next year, where a student who receives a C or better in that class, because it's a course that we have collaborated with CLC, they will then go right into a college credit bearing English and or math class in their freshman year at CLC. Again, that's something that we've worked with in collaboration with them that did not exist before. If they had one of those, they had a math and English, one of those math and English ones, that satisfies that requirement. We're asking that every student comes away with one of these, just one. And as we've worked in, trying to elevate students to explore an honors class and breaking down those barriers, this is something that we've been doing really well in. But add in there dual credit courses. We've been working to elaborate and make those connections with CLC to have more dual credit courses. And then of course there's test scores, which it's not lost, that's still there as an opportunity to fulfill that requirement. Next slide. The career ready indicators, this is where it's a little bit different, but definitely much more in the area that I've been looking for us to continue to grow in. You need to have 3 of these. So some of them are very simple. You can have community service for 25 hours or summer employment, or if you have a work study program, that works into this as well. But more so, do you have military service that you're committing to, dual credit career pathway course at the local community college, or an industry credential. We have that industry credential right now in our McLean Fogg internship class and our CLC manufacturing initiatives. Those two, we've been up and going with career, our industry credentials that students walk away with. So that would fulfill this for students. And those are the students that were getting lost and ignored, if you will, by only focusing on a test score. Typically, those students were not going to get a 25 on their ACT score, but they were still being very productive. And they were still going out and getting great careers after high school. Internship programs, career development experiences, those are things that we've had for a number of years. We continue to work to increase them. The work study would be one of those increases for next year.
Anthony, I realize these are building goals. These are more for us to see how the building is. Are the students aware that these are goals?
So no, because we've not had that, we haven't had the opportunity to work with them that way.
I guess
So
I'm
there's-
asking is, will they link up and realize these are priorities for us as a school, and this is important for you because it leads to this?
And I think that's where we started with the conversation about youth science.
Right.
And knowing that this is where we wanted to go for the last year or so. And obviously we've been delayed to do that, but with some of these other experiences, we want to see that connection.
Okay.
And with the career pathways as well, making our school a component first. All right, so again, just to finish this off, just remember that, again, the background here was the state was being responsive to a school saying, there are other things that our students are doing and they're being successful and they will be successful in their lives. And we are not acknowledging that. We're only acknowledging a test score. And so that's where this came from. And so that's why there's 3 college ready indicators that the state said, try to fill in those with 3 by the time you're done with 4 years of high school education. So that's what our goal is going to be. So it'll be a reflection of how our seniors are graduating, where they're at. And we have to look at how can we show kind of benchmarks for each class as they go along. Have they, especially the junior and senior year, where are they at their junior year? And how close do we feel like we'll hit that mark going into the senior year?
Some of these things are outside of the school. Record keeping, tracking seems challenging.
So that is a piece that we have wrestled with. And there's some pieces there that students will have to self-submit. And so to Peter's point, the more that we're communicating that this is a goal, this is a way that you could fulfill this. If you have been in employment for the summer and you tell your counselor, the counselor fills that data in PowerSchool, then that would be one of your indicators. So that's an educational piece that we're going to have to do. Things like 25 hours of community service is not a graduation requirement for us, but NHS, student leadership, they already require this as being a member of those groups. So we would naturally go to those groups and say, hey, you have this. We're submitting your name because you've already achieved this as a required meeting in the school. So there's different ends to it. This is going to be a little growth for us, but I do believe it's a better, more well-rounded description of our students and where they're at.
I'm excited to see it because having 3 kids that are all over the map with academics and one that, college may not be in their future. I don't want her to feel that if you don't go to college, you will be nothing. I said, they have to see that there are good paying jobs with technical skills and you find your interests. And I wasn't here for the meeting, but I did watch the part on the youth science saying the aptitude is there for our girls and for our, for different groups that we didn't traditionally see going into certain roles. And we as a school, I think it's our responsibility to make sure you have the aptitude, you can do this. You may not have thought about it before, but let's start thinking about it.
And then let's influence that courses you take. So, and as having a son who was a junior this year, who will probably take AP Physics in calculus at the same time, but is telling me he wants to take metals and CNC machining, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And we're having that conversation. Do I go to trade school? Do I go to university? We'll get there. We'll work through that. But partly, I want you to have those experiences so you can say, I absolutely like that, or I absolutely hate it, and I want to go that direction. So I think this will help with
Yes.
that. All right.
All right, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Anthony. Very exciting.
So we'll get all that information in February.
Mhm.
Okay, do we have any more presentations? I think that's
About a
it.
third of the way there.
I know, we gotta keep moving here, guys. Okay. I want to take a moment. I would like to welcome a new person. I'm knocking stuff over. Peter, this is Peter Gill. He will be taking on Gerard's PR person position. If you could all say hello. Peter, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'll be the new public relations director for both D 120 and D 75. I'm really excited about it. I start tomorrow morning.
That's
I'm
right.
gonna Get home, get a good night's sleep.
Bright early.
So, but the good thing is I'm only 3 miles away. I live over in Libertyville.
That way.
Thank you.
Right that way.
Yeah, I'll find my way home. I'm just this side of Condell. So I've lived there for a few years now, and the last 2 years I spent as the communications person for District 64 in Park Ridge. It's a K through 8 district, about 4,300 students. So I've really enjoyed it, except there's this little pandemic that kind of got in the way and made it a little tricky at times. But you know, you learn how to do the job, and then all of a sudden you learn how to build an airplane again while it's flying. So it's, I mean, you've all been through that. So I got a real diverse career before that. In private, I worked at an architectural firm doing communications. I worked for a non-for-profit business trade association, which was kind of a lobby group in Illinois. And I spent my first 12 years as a newspaper reporter and editor out in McHenry County, the Northwest Herald. So I've covered school districts, especially District 200 out there, which is K through 12. And I'll be pulling from all those experiences as I start this job. I've got a somewhat of a diverse set to consider, and I'll be pulling from all those experiences, and I look forward to it.
Well, welcome aboard. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, the next thing is our consent agenda. I need to vote on that. Does anybody have any questions, anything they want to pull? Are we all good with that? Okay, let's keep this moving. So I need one motion for.
Okay, so the first action item is to approval to hire the shared services.
No, we have
gotta
to
approve the consent
Peter,
agenda.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
we have to do the consent agenda. So we
Sorry.
just have to call the roll first.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got it. All right.
Got excited.
I did. Mel. oh, yeah,
We do need a motion to approve first of all.
Yes, need a motion to approve.
Seconded.
Strelly,
Yes.
vote,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Ponce,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Wellington, yes, Yaffe.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, and the next board action items are, the first one is the approval to hire. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education of Mundelein High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve a shared services Medicaid specialist / grant writer position as presented. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Was that Mellon on the second?
It was.
Yaffe?
Oh, hold
Yes.
on, just a general question. Do we, when we approve a position like that, do we give them like not to exceed X, or how do they just?
We just approve the position
free
that they
rein?
presented and then they will hire someone.
Okay, but they don't have any constraint on budget. They just hire for whatever value they need to
The
get.
salary that they listed out there, it might vary a little bit based on the skill set of the person, but it's in the range that they gave us.
All right. Yaffe,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Ponce,
Yes.
Strelly,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Wellington, yes. Vote,
Yes.
all right.
The next one is the approval to hire. Recommended motion is that the Board of Education of Mundelein High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve a shared services EPA certified HVAC position as presented. Have a motion? Seconded.
Australia,
Yes.
vote,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Pounce,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Wellington, yes, Yaffe.
Yes. Okay, we're going to need to adjourn into executive session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. Collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. Or litigation when an action against or affecting or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting minutes. And discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, whether for proposed approval by the body of minutes or the semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by section 2.06. So everybody else needs to go.
So moved.
Sorry, I put this message before that.
So moved.
So,
Good evening.
have a good night.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We're good.
Okay, I have a motion to go back into open session.
So moved.
Second. Who was second? Okay. Pounce,
Yes.
Becky?
Yep.
Wellington, yes, Yaffe,
Yes.
vote,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Australia. Okay, we're back in open session at 10:10.
Okay, so the last action that we have is to approve the executive session minutes. Were there any issues with those? They look good. Okay. I thought everyone thought they looked good. Okay, so the recommended motion is that the Board of Education of Meadow Lane High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the executive session minutes for June 8th, 2021. I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Australia,
Yes.
vote,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Pounce,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Wellington, yes, Yaffe.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and the next thing we have is president's prerogative. There's just a couple things that I wanted to talk about. First, really briefly, every year we go through an application for school board governance recognition, an application that we fill out, turn into ISB, and then we receive that. It's been fine. It just, and I had it all emailed to you. If anybody needs a paper copy, I have 2 copies that you can take a look at if you want to take one home, or you can print it off your email, but I generally, we kind of list, there's a list of questions, what you're doing in your district to show how your governance, how you handle onboarding new members, how you do superintendent reviews, all kinds of different things that we do, like professional development that we attend. Is it important that we continue to do this for everyone, or is this something, I was the president in coordination with Ron, who's been extremely helpful, have taken care of it, and that's fine. Is that something we want to continue going forward to doing? Or is it something that you guys are like, Kevin, is there any benefit that you want to enlighten?
So the emphasis for the district to achieve board recognition status occurred probably one of the first years when I started, and that drive came from the board. And one of the reasons was they wanted to put an emphasis for all board members to make sure they were going through trainings, attending meetings, and really spreading the word about Mundelein High School in our community. Because that is a part of it, because what it means is when you're going to different conferences or attending, you're representing our community and really wanting you to speak about all the things that we're doing. And part of that is just, it shows in your modeling as board members, you're continuing to learn in your role. And that's what we ask of our teachers. That's what we ask of our students. So that's why we initially said, way back when, the board wanted to do that. I'd say from a Lake County standpoint, in regards to Illinois, Lake County probably has one of the highest percentages, at least it's what the School Board Association tells us, for school boards that do earn recognition status. And that's also significant because it's the involvement that you have as community members representing the board, also for a county.
I also think it's important in terms of a school board that changes and goes forward, that you're creating continuity so that, you know, you get new members and all of a sudden you can have problems and divisiveness and difference of opinions. And if we're all working on this together, we're working as a board to come together. So I think that from that standpoint, it's really important.
And if you want to see what the application itself looks like, I also got that along. And it is helpful to see, you know, it just kind of gives you, it puts everything in perspective of, here's what we're doing, here's how we onboard new members, here's how we evaluate superintendent. So, and like up until now, Anna and Ron have been really good managing this.
I came onto a board that was very divided. So it was a very difficult transition. And so having had that experience, I've found that this, going through the board governance and making sure that we keep in line has been something that makes me feel comfortable and assured that not only that it happens now, but that it'll happen in the future.
Well, I came from a board where we didn't really spend a lot on professional development. So I think it is nice when you go to conferences, you get different perspectives and different information, which is good too.
I think it's good, and I think that if we're attending things like the Illinois School Board meeting, sometimes occasionally the national one, or maybe it's, you know, a handful go to that or whatever. Those are important and they show, because you do attend some good sessions and you get a lot out of that. So I think that's.
Okay, well then we will continue on with that. You will find this in your email.
Yep, we said.
And on that, okay, and the next thing is masks. I just want to have a unified statement when we're going to have some clear communications going out to our community. Obviously, from the community comment today, we are going to have, I would say, challenging year in some aspects, because there are many ways you could argue for, as Lindsay Shifley spoke about, afraid that, you know, it's going to be very divisive among the student bodies. It could be divisive among parents. It could be divisive among our staff. And there's a variety of reasons. Some kids, the parents will want them to get it and the kids don't want it. Sometimes the kids will want it, the parents don't want them to get it. There's a lot of scenarios that are probably going to play out in your school, and our school. I just wanted to be very calm, and I want a very consistent message sent out from Kevin. Obviously, we want to follow the CDC guidelines and how that's going to look. So if there's any comments anybody wants to make right now, and what
You want me to go through what we're planning on doing first, and then you can shoot me some questions? Okay. So when the CDC guidelines came out, I did forward those to you, so you had them as well. What we did is meet as a joint cabinet. Members from District 75 and 120 came together on Monday, and we went through the document and wanted to decide what that meant for us and how we would apply that. Before we began that process, I asked the question, what is our goal for going into this year based off of what we've learned from last year? And what we came back to consensus on, we wanted to get back to normal, as much as normal as we possibly could, period. And seeing how the CDC had written the guidance, the first question we were able to answer is, how are we going to address masks? The result for us is, and to start right up front with it, masks will be recommended, but they're not going to be required at Mundelein High School. That would be our recommendation. We feel it's up to the parents to be able to decide what they want to be able to do with their children and what they feel most comfortable with entering into the building. We did not feel it was practical from an organizational standpoint that we would be able to maintain or even ascertain a list of students or staff that have been vaccinated. It's all voluntary. Our nurses could go through the iCare system, which is the state system that monitors vaccinations for youth. But that would mean our nurses would be going in on a regular basis and manually checking every student, whether or not they've received the vaccination. We just don't believe that's a good use of their time. We were able to come to that determination because when we look back at our data, the number of students that actually demonstrated symptoms We never identified them when they even went through the pre-screening process. So when they entered through the buildings and they had to do temperatures and they'd answer 5 questions, we did not one time have one student stopped going through that process. So as we started to talk about the other parts, like the 3 feet, and knowing the other mitigations that we'd still be able to do, we felt knowing our transmission rates with COVID right now are so low that it's worth taking the opportunity to say, we're returning to school. If you're more comfortable wearing a mask, wear one. If not, don't. There is a caveat to that. The one part the CDC made it absolutely clear. They've put in their documentation, regardless of federal, state, or local guidelines, everyone's wearing a mask on a bus. So we will be communicating, if you're going to ride the bus, you must wear a mask. To start off the year, what we're going to do for the pre-screening, our students last year had the blue cards. This year, we're going to send a letter out to our families at the beginning. If your student's sick, has these symptoms, keep them home. And we'll send some reminders. That is our best defense with preventing from anything going on in the school. Families keeping their children home and knowing that we'll support our families if this child needs to stay home. So the whole idea is to get back to normal. The pre-screenings, kids coming into the building, temperature checks and all that, not being done anymore. It was not effective. It was more of a visual that made people feel more secure. The other part that was clear with the CDC is they've provided the research saying COVID's not transmitted based on the surfaces. So one of the things we spent a lot of time on was our students had to clean the desk when they were done with it. The student coming in cleaned it before they sat down in it. We were making sure they were taking squirts of hand sanitizer before they left the room. We're not doing that anymore. So we're going to start off back as normal. If somebody wants to wipe their desk down, they most certainly can. The teacher would like to have wipes in her room or his room. They can certainly ask for those and we'll accommodate to make sure that's available. But we're going back to more of a traditional model of what most of our kids would hopefully had experienced. Because here's something that was sobering as we started to talk about. Think about which grade level has had one full year of a high school experience in the building.
Seniors.
Exactly. Out of 4 classes of students, right now we'll only have one group of kids that have actually had a high school experience. And we've got to get back to that. I think we've shown through mitigations, we'll be able to do that. So lunches is the next one. As we talk about lunches, here's a big one. Our students proved last year having open campus was viable, no matter what age you were. We are still going to look at having open campus for all grades. So if the students want to be able to go out, walk up to Jewel, wherever, to go get some lunch, they can. If they want to walk outside and go hang out on the other side of the baseball field, yeah, bad. If we find out our students aren't able to manage that, we'll look at it again. But for lunch, that's going to be an option. We're still going to have a lunchroom and we're still going to keep the LMC open for lunch. So that time will be secured. Now, leaving the LMC.
What's LMC?
So that's our learning media center.
Oh,
We're
thank you.
typically, we say a library,
Got it.
another place for kids to go. Now, what that does do, that takes 4 periods a day where we're not going to have as much access for our kids that are in class that may normally go to the library. But we felt that was at least a worthwhile trade-off, depending on seeing how the patterns are for our students in lunch. Lunch itself, we're going to encourage our students that are in line because it's a bottleneck right there because it's right by the main doors going into the gymnasium. It gets tight there. We're going to keep encouraging kids to social distance. They're going to go through the line. The hot plate lunches, they'll be pre-made and wrapped. So if students at a hot lunch, they'll be able to get it. And same thing if there's going to be some a la carte, but it's going to be wrapped and they're just taking it. Like we're not going to have salad bar or anything else like that. So we're changing that up. So a little bit more conscientious. Lunchroom sitting, kids will be able to sit where they want to be able to sit. They just need to be mindful of where they're at. The cleaning, because we talked about surfaces. So like during lunch, after lunch, we always clean the tables. They're still going to be cleaned. The frequency, like with bathrooms and everything, would be what would be on a normal schedule for cleaning. They will look at some maybe high touch areas every now and then, depending on how things are going, but we're not going to be looking to have people always walking up and down hallways, spraying door handles each and every time. The cleaning, so if we do have somebody in the classroom that had COVID-like symptoms, the students will be removed, along with the adult. We'll use the ultraviolet light machines that we have to clean that area back down, and then we'll be able to have our students come back in there. So we're gonna have alternate classrooms or space for people to go. We do still need to be very mindful about contact tracing. So we are still gonna be asking assigned seats, buses, and classrooms. Because if that does happen, what we do want to be able to do is say, all right, your child was by so-and-so. So they may need to quarantine. If you're able to provide us any information that may inform us that they wouldn't need to quarantine because they're vaccinated, that would help us with helping you with your child being able to return to school or not. So that will be able to help with minimizing the number of students, depending if they've been vaccinated, with needing to be quarantined.
Kevin, to help with that, can you, I don't know if we can do this, but can you, if parents choose to, optionally go in and fill something out that says my kid's vaccinated, so then you know already? Can we, it's not a mandate because you can't require, but can you just say optionally, if you want to put it in, you can do that?
Yeah, yes.
Because that
no,
might
choose
help,
not to
because
answer.
then, yeah, because that might help, because then like, you know, people could come forward, and then as you guys are doing the contact tracing, you can look right away, oh, they're on the list, they're vaccinated, they're probably.
It minimizes the disruption to that student and the more immediate
Yes.
Yeah.
response to
Yeah.
what you do or don't have to do.
Yep. So yeah, we can certainly do that with asking, if you want to volunteer, please do.
Okay.
We just gotta have, and I'd work with Shane, how do we make sure who has that information? Right, whoever's doing the contact tracing, if it's a nurse or whatnot. But certainly, yes, very good idea.
Kevin, do you see any distinction between calling it recommended but not required versus optional, mask optional?
So. the
That's what
reason
all the
we
parents
said-
are asking for, mask optional.
Well,
But I
Recommended
think,
is
but I think
Is it the
recommended,
same
not
thing?
required is the same thing.
Yeah.
Like,
It is
I
the
do.
same
because it
thing?
is saying, hey, we're still recommending you do this because of all the
The
reasons
parents that
why.
are asking for optional
But-
will happily
that.
understand what he means.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We'll be okay.
I would strictly
I
follow their.
I totally get what you're
verbiage.
saying.
Right.
so it is, it's following the CDC's verbiage,
Mhm.
Yeah.
saying recommended. And the other thing, when we talk, I mean, when we go out to public places now and you walk in, what's it say? Recommended,
Mhm.
but, you know, the bottom part. So we're trying to be consistent for what I
Okay.
think people have been experiencing during the past few months.
Okay.
Locker rooms are getting opened back up, so students in PE will have locker room usage. We are working with the department chair there and in athletics, because those classes are typically larger. So we're gonna wanna have some kind of a spacing, or at least alternate. A through L gets the first 4 minutes to change, then they come out, and then the other half of the alphabet goes something, just so we don't have 250 kids crammed into a smaller locker room. We still are gonna be vigilant with trying to do the mitigation of at least 3 feet wherever we can.
The music and band singing.
What about touching and making out and that kind of stuff? Well, I mean, it happens if you know.
No.
Yes.
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen at Mudline High School. Our kids are very good about that. No, so I go back to whatever was happening before. I mean, we're not encouraging our students to have public displays of affection prior to this. We'd still be not encouraging them to not do that now.
Right.
But it's not a more severe consequence or anything like that.
You're not gonna call it out or make a new. No, okay,
No, because it probably just happened more.
yeah.
So
Too quick.
I was just gonna suggest that in our communications that we do say, this is the plan. And subject to change.
Because if things would trend the wrong direction, then we already know what we need to do.
So part of it would be, we will still continue to monitor the trends.
Yeah.
Locally and within our school. If we start seeing either one of them change, we would look at modifying. And we'd want to put out there the potential means, if we start seeing a large, an increase in our building, we say we're going to require everyone to wear masks for 2 weeks, right? If we start getting a larger number, if that prevents Lake County from coming in and saying we've got to shut down the school. So we will communicate that so people are aware, definitely. What else, Peter?
You had said that with the open campus from 9th through 12th grade, I'm assuming that helps spread students out during the lunch periods,
Yes,
right?
sir.
is what we're looking at then a COVID related issue? Or is it, if we find that it can be done successfully and COVID is behind us, that could continue regardless
That
of
could be
whether or
one of
not
the
COVID was.
Good
the issue?
outcomes.
Could be one of the good outcomes. The fear was the kids were too young and we weren't confident with having them go out on their own, but. So yes, could it stay? Is that your question?
Well, I guess I'm asking both. If we find that they're successful with it and there's no
Yeah,
longer
why
a
take
COVID
it away
issue, would
then?
you maintain it? There's a possibility of that, right?
Correct.
Is it, I guess just a follow-up question with that, is it something that the parent, like, are we just gonna say it's open, or will the parents have to like opt in or opt out, I guess, so to speak, or? It seems a lot easier to just say it's open.
The idea was saying it's an open campus.
Right,
Right?
they can't
As
control
a- as a
Right.
parent, you don't want your child going out. We would hope
You'd have to talk
Communicate
about it,
that.
'cause you can't control them leaving
Right.
school.
We're not gonna be trying to monitor every student that's walking in and out, and you're on the do not exit list.
Yeah.
Right.
Sticking with that theme, I just want to share, this has been on my mind 24/7 since the new guidance came out, as a teacher, as a parent, as a board member. And I very much so appreciate the direction you're taking. I've been back in my school working for 2 days, and it is very awkward and uncomfortable. I showed my vaccination card, so I don't have to wear a mask anymore, because that's what my district is doing. And everyone's walking by each other, not knowing, are they supposed to have a mask on? Are they not supposed to have a mask on? And I've been running through all the scenarios as a teacher. How am I gonna operate my class when I do a lab? Do I have to match unvaccinated kids and pair vaccinated kids? If you have a mask, you can't work with someone that doesn't. This like takes that all out of the, sorry, this takes that all out of the equation. And I feel like now the school can focus on all those things we talked about tonight and get back to taking care of kids.
Well, and I appreciate it too, because I think we've all been thinking about this a lot, looking at the verbiage of what it said, recommended versus required. And I think I don't want any kids to feel divided or bullied, or because whether that was their choice, their parents' choice, or their health problems that they had, that they couldn't get vaccinated. I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable coming into the school. And if things go great, then we're awesome. And if they go the wrong direction, then like you said, we can nip that.
Yeah.
Would you use similar measurement as you had in the past, or some degree of it, or like you did with metrics? Not so much a committee per se, but
Yeah, I still want us to use similar metrics to what we had before with the community, and still follow the same ones with number of students that we're seeing that needed to be quarantined versus actually having COVID. So those would be the two driving ones.
Could you add a component for, students who are, or people in the community who are coming down with it that are vaccinated versus people who are not vaccinated, when you're doing those metrics numbers?
They won't know.
Well, if someone gets hospitalized or gets, they're gonna ask them right away if they're vaccinated or not. Right? So that would be like CDC, the Lake County Health Department would come out with that number.
Yeah, but.
Number of
But
hospitalizations.
they won't share that. I don't think.
We
they
wouldn't
can
know
share
if they're
that.
ours, right?
Yeah, they're not gonna share that.
Right, but in the metrics, we used community numbers. We used, so if they come out with a number that said, this many hospitalizations in Mundelein, vaccinated versus unvaccinated, that would something we could share. That would be part of our metrics to put in the same things that we were measuring, but measuring them vaccinated versus unvaccinated where possible.
We could.
Because they will be.
I would just be, Laura, I would just be saying, what are our numbers for those that are getting COVID? Because at that point, that's the rate of potential higher transmission. Whether you're vaccinated or not, is irrelevant with the number of the COVID rates.
Because once you've got it, you've got it.
Yeah.
Like once you may not have as severe of a case, and maybe you're only in the hospital for 2 days if you were vaccinated. I mean, that's the only difference that I've seen is people who've gotten vaccinated and managed to get it, it's just usually a lot less severe.
Well, but if you're gonna shut down the schools, then the people who are vaccinated shouldn't have to stay home and, they could still stay at school because they're vaccinated. They're not in jeopardy of catching the illness is what I'm saying.
I think that's true based on,
Quarantining would be based off of your risk factors.
Right.
They count. I think the one thing to keep in mind too is where we were and where we are now are two vastly
Very
different
different
places.
places, yeah.
And the likelihood of that compared to
Yeah.
where a year ago
Right.
is much different. And even a year ago, the likelihood of that was relatively reduced.
as time goes on though, what we know now is that the vaccines have worked beyond expectation.
Right.
But as variants change, as vaccines wear off over time, we don't yet know exactly how it's all going to affect us. It's to be learned.
All right, well, I want to thank you all for your input, because.
So we're looking to put a communication together. Plan would be to get it out to our families and staff end of today, end of tomorrow.
End of today might be rough.
How long you want to stay here?
I think I think you'll be applauded in the community for that.
I do
Oh, yeah,
too.
yeah,
Because they're
Everybody's
they're gonna have a
waiting.
nightmare over there trying to monitor that.
they are.
And I just think since they didn't come out and say it's required, it's recommended, I think that you're doing the right thing. Just say
Yeah, it's just
recommended,
common
not
sense.
required. And then if people choose to, they do it. If they don't, they don't.
We just gotta be ready to and be conscious. I mean, there's gonna be families and so they're gonna be nervous by it.
Absolutely.
So we just gotta be mindful of that and have, be able to hear and listen.
And if anybody, if they are vaccinated, they choose, anybody who, nobody should be picked on for choosing to wear one or not choosing to wear one.
People should be picked on in general.
Exactly, but in this situation, I want to make sure that they have some place that, for someone they can,
Yeah. to be able to go.
everybody's cognizant of it.
It actually, I talked to a number of high school kids. I asked, what do you think if somebody's wearing a mask and you're not? And they're like, not a big deal to me.
Yeah.
There you go.
We're used
I
to
mean,
it now.
Kids are like, whatever.
It's not a kid issue.
Well, you've taken the question piece out. Now it's not trying to figure out why does that kid have a mask on? It's just, oh, he just chose to wear one.
Right.
That's it.
Okay, and then the last thing I said, I had thrown out an invite for a team building thing with some administrators and ourselves. And it's getting kind of close to the end of summer. Is anyone having interest, or do you think it's just too tight for time? Because Laura said she would still be interested, but a Friday afternoon, I don't know what everyone's schedules look like.
This Friday?
The following Friday. Yeah, okay. Okay.
I mean, I would be interested. It's just coming in,
Yes,
a-
ma'am.
coming in a few weeks, there's a lot of
That's what I'm
personal things
saying.
going, but if you threw a day out and said, this is when we're doing it, I would try to make it for sure, but
Okay.
I don't know right offhand.
I'd love to have a dinner again prior to a board meeting.
Me too,
Yeah.
Peter.
Wow.
Me too, Peter.
Exactly.
That does a nice job. with it.
We,
We used to have like.
the
a
reason
small-
we had that is because the
smoked an amazing
board
chicken
voted
today.
for it.
I really.
What did she do?
You smoked an amazing
Chicken
chicken.
today.
All right, well, I may throw out a date, and if anybody can make it, they can make it, and if they
Sounds
can't.
good.
Thank you for the.
Just let her know.
Yeah.
That's nice.
All right, so I think all we have to do is adjourn and.
We need a motion.
Yeah, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Becky,
Yes.
Vogt,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Ponce,
Yes.
Estrelli,
Yes.
Wellington, yes, Yaffe.
Yes.
All right, our meeting is adjourned
Woo-hoo.
at 10:36.
Oh my God, it's bedtime.
Oh. We meant to get back to these, and we haven't done it, and I made copies.
Hand it out.
Extra clips.